So good morning to everyone and welcome to the 7th Annual Ottawa Youth Conference in Ottawa in honor of Canada's National Day of Remembrance and Action on Mass Atrocities. Our theme this year is Indigenous Truths, Resilience, and Trust.
My name is José Miguel Jaimes, and this is Holly. And this is, we attend Sir Winfield Laurier Secondary School located in Orleans. We are the student managers for the Student Planning Committee of this conference. Our grade 12 Native Studies class has been working for 2 months on this event.
Before we begin, we would like to pause and think about land acknowledgements. Recently on an episode of CBC Radio's Unreserved podcast, our keynote speaker, Rosanna Deerchild, interviewed Hayden King about his regrets on writing the territorial acknowledgement for Ryerson College. He challenged the radio audience to reflect on territorial acknowledgements. According to King, there was a rush to officialize a territorial acknowledgement, and his regrets concerning Ryerson's land acknowledgement, according to him, were, quote, "I think that as a conversation has advanced around territorial acknowledgements, some more scrutiny was put onto ours, among others. For me personally, I think I started to see how the territorial acknowledgement could become very superficial, and also how it sort of fetishizes these actual, tangible, concrete treaties. They're not metaphors, they're real institutions. And for us to write and recite a territorial acknowledgement that sort of obscures that fact, I think we do a disservice to that treaty and to those nations." With Hayden King's words in mind, it is important to recognize that the land we are gathered on today is not just Carleton University's campus, but we are on traditional, unceded territory of Algonquin and Anishinaabe people. As high school students, I encourage us to all commit to being willing to pay far better attention than past generations have to how the government territorial acknowledgements and lax institutions, now how we are working to ensure that equitable opportunities are being provided to the First Nations people whose land we are settled on.
Now, we would like to introduce Monique Menach. She is the member of the Algonquins of Barrier Lake and Algonquin First Nation in Quebec. As Executive Director and co-founder of Indigenous Culture and Media Innovations, her work is focused on the facilitation of the development of Indigenous artists throughout Ontario and Quebec. Monique is here as a knowledge keeper today.
We would like to invite Monique to come up now to the podium and offer opening words to get our day together started in a great way. Monique.
Bajashe, welcome. Welcome to Algonquin unceded, unsurrendered territory. That means there's no treaty here. We did not relinquish our land, and we still consider it our territory. I wanted to start today to open this conference about Indigenous truths, resilience, and trust with a story that I heard from a community member. Her name was Anita DeCourse. And she shared this story with me and gave me permission to share it with you. And the story is about light. The Creator gifted all of creation light. And when I say all of creation, I mean more than just human beings. I mean all of creation. All plants, the ones that crawl, the ones that swim, the ones that fly, the four legs, everyone. And it was during a time when all of creation could speak to one another easily, unlike now. So when they received this gift of light, there was concern. There was concern that something might happen to it. They wanted to protect it. So all of creation gathered together to have a discussion, to talk about what they should do with this light. And there was a little mouse, the smallest amongst them, who said, "I have an idea." But the rest of the animals and people and plants and trees, they were all so busy talking they didn't hear her. And they said, "We should put it up in the sky, because then it would shine on everything." And some thought that was a good idea. But others said, "No, because sometime, someday, someone might be able to go up there. They might be able to take it. So they decided no, they wouldn't do that. And then they said, let's put it under the ocean. Let's put it deep in the ocean where no one will find it. And the mouse said, I have an idea. I have an idea. And someone else said, no, because someday someone might be able to go down to the ocean, to the deep depths of the ocean and find it. And so they discussed and talked and talked and discussed for days and days and days. And all during that time, the mouse kept saying, I have an idea. And then finally, there was a lull. You know that quiet in the conversation, all of a sudden, everyone stops talking at once for some reason. And into that quiet, the mouse yelled, I have an idea. And suddenly they heard her, and they went, oh, there she is. What is your idea? And she said, let's take the light and let's put it inside of us. And that's what they did, because when they put it inside of us, they shared it amongst everyone. And that's why now each of us, all of us, have a piece of light within us that we can share with others. When we see that others have lost their light, we can share ours. And that way, if something does happen to someone, the rest can gather around, and that light will still be protected. And that's what I think we're doing here today. There has been darkness in Indigenous history. A lot of darkness. But through it all, Indigenous people have kept that light burning amongst themselves, and now we're able to share it with you. And you have that light within you as well. And it's your job, now that you know, to share it with each other. And today, you're going to shine that light on Indigenous truths and resilience and trust. And I hope you walk away burning brighter, shining brighter. I'm going to say a few words to our Creator to open today's conference. Kachimigwich Jemnido, thank you, Creator. Thank you for bringing these people together with open hearts, with open minds. Help them to see truth. Help them to hear beauty. Help them to speak with compassion, to learn with joy, and to treat each other with gentleness. And help them to help others to shine. Kachimigwich, 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 Kachimigwich. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Monique.
Now, if Christina Gabriel will join us at the podium to share a few words on the relationship between Indorama and the Faculty of Public Affairs at Carleton University. Christina is the Associate Dean at the Faculty of Public Affairs and has provided this space for us for the last 5 years. And without his partnership, the conference would not be possible.
Welcome all of you to Carleton University for the National Day of Remembrance and Action on Mass Atrocities. The next line of my note says who I am, but we just did that. So I would also like to thank Monique Natch for being here as a knowledge keeper for today's event, and I would also like to acknowledge that we are guests on the unceded territory of the Algonquin Nation. You will be thinking a lot about this over the next 2 days as you consider the theme of this conference, Indigenous Truths, Resilience, and Trust. We have been discussing this theme in the Faculty of Public Affairs at Carleton as well this year, and it is in sync with our mission of the faculty, which is to foster informed citizenship, inform governance and public policy, build better democracy and better societies, and address regional and global challenges. Part of our mission, and that of Carleton as a whole, has been to ensure that Indigenous learning and experiences are represented in our classrooms and the university, and we're working towards that. And this has been happening on the campus. In addition, our faculty is a place where many students come to learn more about public policy and governance. Traditionally, that has meant Canadian public policy and governance, but we are also the home to an Indigenous policy administration program that attracts many people who are working with and in Indigenous governments in Canada. Those are just a couple of examples of how we at Carleton University are incorporating Indigenous traditions and learning in our curricula, but there's so much more to be done. And I would commend all of you for bringing your attention and creativity to this important societal issue. And I look forward to learning and hearing some of the discussions, learning from you and hearing some of the discussions over the next 2 days. I would also encourage you to talk to me or any of the FP ambassadors you see here about programs in our faculty over your very short lunch break. We have invitations, though, for you to come back to our campus in the fall for lunch and a tour and to meet a student and attend a class. And I should say that very much you students who are engaged and concerned and passionate about societal issues and social justice are the kinds of students we really do want to attract to the Faculty of Public Affairs. So I look forward to welcoming you back. And with that, I would like to wish you a very successful day as you pursue your conversations over here today. Thanks.
So we're just going to take a short break and let some of late schools come on in. Thank you. Welcome to the late arrivals. So jumping back in, we'd like to thank everybody for being here, and we recognize that this event would not be made possible without the efforts of all of those involved in planning today's conference. We would like to extend a special thank you and welcome to our guest speakers, who will be sharing with us their knowledge and experiences today. We will gain insight and much to reflect upon as we listen to the diversity of speakers who have joined us here today.
As well, we thank Ms. Tricia Ladak and Ms. Maylan Morton, who were instrumental in organizing this year's Youth Conference and the past 6 events since 2013. Thank you to Mark Morton for helping us in the planning and running of today's conference, and to our awesome team of students from St. Wilfrid Lawyers Grade 12 Native Studies class that organized the conference in the themes of venue and logistics, communications, finance, and West liaisons, with the help of our outstanding teacher, Mr. Timothy Kelly, who made Indigenous activism part of his course.
Of course, our school board has also had much to do in making this day possible. Thank you for the support of the Indigenous Education team at the OCDSB, and Reg Laverne from the Student Success at OCDSB, and our superintendent, Mary Jane Farish, as well as the support from Sir Wilfrid Laurier's principal, Nancy Jerosen.
Next, we must take a moment to thank all the Campbellton staff members who supported us in organizing the Youth Conference. For this fabulous venue of rich craft hall, we must acknowledge the Faculty of Public Affairs, a key member of the faculty's team who assisted us into the logistics of welcoming 400 students and educators, as well as our esteemed roster of guest speakers, is Cassie Smith. Once again, Cassie, you have pulled everything together.
And a very big thank you to the caterers who are providing the lunches and snacks, the audio-visual staff of Carleton University who are providing all of the technical support, as well as the Sir Wilfrid Laurier Secondary School's production team, and the conference and event staff who have set up all the spaces that we are using today.
Now, we will please ask all of you to go to the 3rd page of your workbook and see what's there. It is very important that we give a big thank you to all of our partners and sponsors who provided the funding to make these 2 days possible. A special thank you to the Faculty of Public Affairs, Carleton University, Education Foundation of Ottawa, Student Success, the Ottawa County District School Board, the OSSDF, Matthew Wolof at Building Together, Tim Turney at the City Council, and St. Wilfrid Laurier Secondary School for all of their contributions.
Great. Now, we're going to talk some more logistics about the conference itself today. So, bathrooms are all located and are all assigned pointing to each washroom in the entrance. So there's one washroom right outside of the auditorium to the left, and there's a sign pointing that way. Now, regarding important information about the conference today, please look into the front part of your workbook. On the very first page, you will see a colored sticker. Each color represents which groups you will be traveling with between each workshop. Watch for Mohammed, Sarah, and Miranda, who will be holding up poster boards directing each color to their stations.
Now we have to do an declaration respecting the workbooks, and it's that certain books might have an error printed, as indigenous activism will be held in the conference room, and the indigenous trust will be held in the atrium.
You are all invited during any spare time at lunch or at the end of the day to step onto the Indigenous Peoples Atlas and explore the First Nations, Métis, and Inuit communities across Canada. Canadian Geographic very kindly lent us this copy of the giant floor map, and it's located in the conference room near the windows that look out to the river. Please remove any footwear before stepping onto the map.
It has also to be announced that after lunch, all students and teachers must be back in the auditorium at no later than 11:50 as we prepare to watch a spectacular cultural performance by Twin Flames.
We invite you to take a look at the wonderful displays brought by our partners just outside of the auditorium, and we also encourage you to write on our gratitude wall. Please write a message to somebody who inspired you today. Our guest speakers would love to hear about how much we appreciate them and their knowledge that they are sharing with us.
Also, a note to all guest speakers and facilitators here today, please return all name tags at the end of the conference as they will be redistributed again tomorrow morning. And please feel free to flag down any of our student volunteers or organizers if you would like your water glasses filled or if you have any questions or concerns.
Now we would like to ask everybody to turn to page 2 of their workbook. So it's of key importance to recognize that on this day, the commitment and effort that the founders of the National Day of Remembrance and Action on Mass Atrocities put into creating this day in Canada. Mr. Norm King and his then Member of Parliament, Paul Dewar, both shared a belief in education and raising awareness in youth as one of the main tools to prevent and learn from mass atrocities. This educational event continues their legacy of commemorating historical mass atrocities and working towards ending current global atrocities. In memory of them, we will now share a moment of silence and recognition for the efforts of Mr. Norm King and Member of Parliament Paul Dewar, who have both passed away in the last year. We will then offer a small token of our appreciation to their loved ones with us today as we share a moment of silence.
Now, we truly believe that to build truth, reconciliation, and trust with the first.
Okay. Yes.
We truly believe that to build truth, reconciliation, and trust with the First Nations in Canada, there has to be a process of recognition and remembrance for the acts of genocide that were deliberately carried out against the First Nations and its people since the European settlement, as has been acknowledged by many prominent political and social figures, such as former Prime Minister Paul Martin and Member of Parliament Maurice Sinclair.
It is necessary for these atrocious acts to be recognized and to heal the wounds caused by colonization to avoid any further crimes against humanity. This is one of the main purposes of NDRAMA and this youth conference, and the reason why we are united here today, to commemorate the life work and creations of Native peoples and their efforts to change their society for the best in their own ways.
Now, we would ask that everyone turn, please, to the page number 4 of their workbooks as we introduce our keynote speaker, a dynamic media personality and very intelligent woman with many talents who came to Ottawa all the way from Winnipeg, who continues to work on behalf of Canada's First Nation, raising awareness through broadcasting. Rosanna Deerchild has been storytelling for more than 20 years. As the host of CBC Radio 1's Unreserved, she shares Indigenous community, culture, and conversation. It won an Indigenous Music Award in 2017 for Best Radio Program, promoting Indigenous music, and in 2018, it won a NAIJA Award for Best Featured Radio Story. As a poet, she has published 2 books. This is a small northern town, won the 2009 Aquabooks Lansdowne Prize for Poetry. Mr. Deerchild novel, Calling Down the Sky, is her mother's residential school survival story and has been translated into Cree and French. She is Cree from Opaipon Napiwan Cree Nation at South Indian Lake in northern Manitoba. Rosanna now lives in her found home of North End, Winnipeg.
Please note that there will be a question and answer period after Rosanna speaks, so please jot down your questions as you listen to her so that you can ask her the questions afterwards. We are now very proud to invite our award-winning keynote speaker, Rosanna Deerchild, to the podium.
Well, thank you. Thank you very much. That was beautiful. You just said half my speech. That's page 1. Thank you very much for inviting me to this beautiful conference, Carleton University. All the organizers, I know it's quite a feat chasing me around and getting me to answer a freaking email, but here I am. I just want to acknowledge our knowledge keeper for sharing that beautiful story. Thank you so much. To the other speakers, I look forward to hearing from all of you. And you should work in radio. You should work in TV. Right? You're already setting careers here. Good to go. Thank you very much again, and also to acknowledge that we are on the unceded territory of our nation. I'm old, 50 is here, this is 50, so I need reading glasses. Danse, Amin, bonjour, and hello. I'm Rosanna Deerchild. I had some cool kid lingo to say here, but my kid assures me it's not cool, and I should not, so I'll go with that part. I'm here just to talk a little bit about what I do on radio and what I do with my poetry and how it all sort of is one big circle to Indigenous storytelling and Indigenous education, and hopefully we get somewhere in terms of reconciliation. I am a storyteller. As the host of Unreserved on CBC Radio, I get to tell the stories of Indigenous people who are doing really amazing things. Our show gives voice to our truths, to our resilience, and we get to share that with listeners right across the country. We have started conversations, we have offered teachings, we have shared untold history, and we have inspired change in individuals, in communities, and in the country. And it's a role that I take very seriously. But my heart, my fast-beating heart, belongs to poetry. Some people will go to church, some people will go to Sweat Lodge, or they'll go to Sundance, or they make art and music, or they dance and act. For me, poetry is my ceremony. It is my prayer. It is my drum song. It is the space that I go to sing. It is the space that I whisper all my secrets to. It is how I talk to my ancestors and how my ancestors talk to me and through me. Poetry to me is sacred. It's how I told my mother's residential school survivor story. It is how I shared my own story of growing up in a small racist town. And it is how I share how it feels to be an Indigenous woman living in Canada today. I love that storytelling is both my job and my art. But I haven't always felt this way. In fact, there was a time when I had no voice, and I didn't feel like I had any story that was worth telling. As you heard, my family comes from the Okipana, Piyuu, and Cree Nation. That is in northern Manitoba. It was a beautiful Cree village that was deep in the boreal forest on a little island we called Wapoos Bay in southern Indian Lake. It was pretty idyllic. My people were caribou hunters, trappers, fishers, moccasin makers, beadwork masters, seamstresses, storytellers, singers, and champion jiggers. A little known fact about the Cree, we like to jig. I'm a terrible jigger, don't even ask. But unfortunately, I would never know that life because in 1972, the year I was born, Manitoba Hydro built a dam, a hydroelectric dam on the Nelson River. It flooded our lake that we were so happily sitting in for so many generations. It flooded that lake and it flipped our world upside down. As a result of the hydro dam being built, we were relocated. Our community was forcibly relocated to the mainland. We were given very little resource or money to build our community. And so, as a result, it was devastating. It was a devastating effect. The flooding killed the fishery. It drowned the beaver dams. It drove the caribou and the moose away. And it destroyed a way of life that had been there for generations. There were 6 of us kids altogether, but we lost 2 of my sisters to the 60s scoop. Does anybody know what the 60s scoop is? The 60s scoop was a period in Canadian history where the government would take Indigenous children and adopt them out to non-Indigenous families. So we lost thousands of kids that way. Many of them were adopted in different countries, different communities, and there just didn't seem to be any reason for it except that good old word of assimilation. But that, of course, is another story. My mother was a single mom. She worked as a cook. She worked in laundry. She cleaned whatever she could find to do to raise us and to keep us as a family. Some of us had to live with some of our relatives, like I lived with my auntie for a while, my brother lived with his other auntie for a while. But that was all how Indigenous family works. Indigenous family works as a huge unit, not just mother, father, cat, dog, whatever. But we were all in the same family. We were loved and we were cared for. When I was 2, my mother married a non-Indigenous man. He came to our community to hunt moose. Ironically, that was my mother's last name. He thought it was hilarious. Us not so much. And so she married him, and he moved us to a small mining community in northern Thompson. It was Thompson. I don't know why I'm not going to tell you that. Never go there. It was about a 5-hour drive from my community, but it might as well have been another planet because I had never seen white people before. And y'all scared the shit out of me. Y'all still scared the shit out of me. I'm terrified right now. My mother says that I cried the first time I saw somebody with blonde hair and blue eyes. I was like, what's wrong with that person? I hated the food, like margarine freaked me out. I was like, what have you done to this lard? This is weird. White bread, I'm like, what is wrong with this bannock? This is weird. I didn't get it. So, and of course I didn't speak English at the time, so I was just a little wee dear child who battled away and Cree about how weird this place was. And so we grew up in mostly white neighborhoods, and it was very racially divided because you had miners coming from different parts of Canada and living there. And then you had this huge Cree community that was there, that had always been there, and suddenly we were the outsiders. Suddenly we were the ones that were the problem. Suddenly we were the ones that shouldn't have been there. So the first time I heard the word squaw, I was 5. It was my first day at school. I was so excited to go to school. I was like, oh my gosh, I'm gonna learn how to read, and I'm gonna find out what those funny letters are. It's gonna be so awesome, Mama. And she sent me off to school, my grades, and I was all like, I'm gonna make friends, and then, hey, you dirty squaw, get the hell out of here. And that's the kind of thing that I would hear often going to school and growing up in Thompson, NB. And so that was rough, as you can imagine. Our house also was not a very safe place. As it turns out, my mother picked a very abusive man to marry. He abused my mother, he abused us, all my siblings. On paydays, they drank until they blacked out. Then on Sundays, we would go to church and pretend that we were good Christians. And then on Monday, he'd go back to work and I'd go back to school, all shiny, and people wouldn't know what was happening behind closed doors. And that was because my mother was so broken from residential school that this was normal to her. This kind of loveless place was normal to her. She didn't hug me. She didn't tell me I love you. She didn't say I was smart and special, because she didn't hear those things. She didn't have birthday parties. She didn't have Christmas presents. She wasn't told that she was beautiful and smart and kind, even though she was. Because residential school doesn't do those things for Indigenous children. They strip things away. They don't give you things. But I wouldn't know that part of her story until I was an adult. In fact, I didn't even know what residential school was until I was 18 years old. Hadn't been taught in school, nobody talked about it, and yet it was this open wound in my family, in my community, in our nations. All of us were broken from this system that they had created. As a kid, as you can imagine, I was painfully shy. Not so much now, but then I was very shy. And my best friend was a dog named Disco. Cool, right? Who doesn't want to have a dog named Disco? If a teacher called on me in class, I would freak out. I would look down, and if they insisted, then I would burst into tears. I never put my hand up in class, even if I knew the answer. At home, I was always in my room or off, on an adventure with my dog. I was tall and skinny. I had really long, curly hair and giant Indian Affairs glasses. Big feet. So in other words, I was a giant nerd. I'm still a giant nerd, except I have better glasses and a straight eye. So that was good. And so how did I find my story? Well, when I was about 13, I was at the public library after being chased there by a bunch of bullies. I totally found the library by accident. It was literally something out of Mission Impossible. I ran around the corner, I dove into this building, rolled a couple times, looked up, and there was a library. It's like literally my salvation, this place, this building, and these books. Now, I loved reading, as you can probably figure out. I liked to read books about Sasquatch, UFOs, and adult dramas, and science fiction. Anyway, like I said, I was a nerd. And on this day, I happened to wander over to the poetry section, because that's not going to make me look nerdy at all. And mostly it was just like old white men talking about trees, and sad ladies talking about lost love and stuff like that. But then I found this book called Flint and Feather by E. Pauline Johnson. I flipped it open and I read the words, "You have stolen my father's spirit, but his body I only claim." This poem was called The Cattle Thief, and it was about the intentional starvation of the Cree people, my people. I'd never seen anything like it before. I never read anything like it before. It was written by an Indigenous woman. Her name was Pauline, as I said. She was Mohawk, and she lived between 1861 and 1913. Now, during that time, of course, in the 18th and 19th century. It wasn't very ladylike for women to be going around, traveling around the world, performing poetry. So in that in itself was revolutionary. The second thing that she did is that instead of talking about us dying, as many of her contemporaries were, like Duncan E. Scott, who was the Indian Affairs Minister for some time and was behind residential school. Thanks, Duncan. She was writing us about dying. We were always dying. The dying red man trope was what it called. But E. Pauline Johnson was talking about us being alive, surviving, thriving, fighting back. And I'd never seen anything like that. But because of that, because of Pauline, a question began to form in my mind. Could I write stories like that? Could I talk about my life as an Indigenous person? Do I have a story? So I started to keep a journal, and I wrote terrible poetry that rhymed, and really long, dark prose about sad things. And I wrote some more, and I filled journals full of words. But I still didn't call myself a poet. I still didn't call myself a storyteller. I still didn't even think about being on radio. I just thought, this is for me. Nobody's going to see this. In high school, I wrote short stories and essays that got high marks. But then I had a really dark time in my teen years. Being a teenager is hard, I know. But when you're dealing with abusive situations, when you're dealing with racism, when you're dealing with being painfully shy like I was, it almost killed me. Home became unbearable, so I was often homeless. I was sleeping on couches. One time I slept in the laundry room. Alcohol was really accessible and acceptable in a small town, so that's how we coped. That was normal to drink all the time. Drugs, of course, was a big thing too. I found myself in a lot of dangerous situations, and at one time, at my lowest and most deeply depressed time, I tried to commit suicide. But it was the one thing that I'm happy to have failed at. Inevitably, of course, I was kicked out of school, and I sort of just drifted around for a year. I cleaned toilets at a bar, very glamorous. Men are gross. And I could have stayed there. I could have stayed doing this perfectly doable job in this little small town for the rest of my life. Then I thought, the rest of my life? Do I really want to clean toilets for the rest of my life? No, because that was a little voice inside me that said, you can be more than this. And that's no diss, to those people that grind out a living doing these jobs, but my dreams would not let this reality be my life. So I decided that I would go back to school. I was 18, and I had like a double course load. That's like a full day, and then I had to tutor a kid at night, and then I had to go do something else another day, just to get those credits to be able to graduate. I'll never forget the day that I went back to high school. I was 18, so I go in and I register. And there was this teacher, and he was always butting heads with me. He always seemed to be catching me skipping or doing something dumb, suspending me. Eventually, he's the one that kicked me out of high school. Let's call him Mr. Asinine. Now, by the time I got back to high school, Mr. Asinine was the principal. It's like, oh, good, great, yippee. So he's walking me to my first class, and I said, Mr. A, I'm going to graduate this year. I'm going to graduate high school, I'm going to college. And he stopped, and he looked at me, and he laughed. He looked at me and he laughed, and he said, I'll believe that when I see it. Right? Right? So, there's always got to be that one person, that one jerk in your path, hey, who says you can't do something. You're not going to do it. You can't make it. You can't do it. But you should do it anyway, because it really pisses them off. And other stuff. So every time I wanted to give up, I thought of this man's words. I'll believe that when I see it. And every time I wanted to give up, I didn't, because I thought of those words. Fortunately, of course, I had other teachers that were really amazing, including this guy who was a guidance counselor. He would always wear red socks with his sandals. And then I had this other teacher from my first and only Indigenous teacher who actually taught Native studies. Imagine that, teaching Native studies. What? And he took me to my first sweat lodge. He taught me what the Indian Act was. He set me on the path to activism. He set me on the path to poetry. He set me on so many paths. And I will forever be grateful to him. His name was Mr. William Dumas. He's still alive. I just get really emotional. And of course there was that other teacher who really put me on my media course. His name is Mr. Fraser. And I took a media class with him. He taught me how to shoot a camera. He taught me how to, write stuff and talk on radio. And for the first time I thought, oh, maybe I could do this. Maybe I could go into the media. Because when I was a wee dear child and watched Superman, he wasn't the hero to me. Lois Lane was the hero to me. I was like, who's this badass? I like this. She was so she had a je ne sais quoi. She was always smoking. She was always like, where the hell are you, Superman? I don't need you. And you're asking for him, whatever. So I thought, okay, well, I'm going to be a journalist. Getting paid to write stories. Yay. It was my first step towards making my quiet dream real. And then 9 months later, that same man who said he would believe it when he saw it, handed me my diploma. And you better believe that when I took that diploma from his hand, I had the biggest shit-eating grin on my face. I was like, believe it now? Except I didn't mouth the words. So anyway, on to my future. Right. Now, when you live in a small town, your whole life is a small town. Often people would say things like, I'm going to go down south to a big city. And sometimes they would go, and they would get eaten up by that big city. Or they would come back a little more battered, a little more bruised than they were when they left. So I was determined that I would be neither. And it was in the big city down south, also known as Winnipeg, that I finally found my voice. In fact, you just can't shut me up now. That's why I have a speech, because if I didn't have a speech, I'd be sitting here all day. You'd be sitting here all day, I'd be standing here all day. I went to Creative Communications program at Red River College, which is a 2-year program, because I didn't have 4 years. I didn't want to go to Rogers, so that would take way too long. So I took Creative Communications, which is a 2-year course that in the first year teaches you public relations, which I was really terrible at advertising, which I was even worse at, and journalism. And then the second year, you focus on whatever major it is you want, which of course I chose journalism. And then when I finished that, I pretty much hit the ground running. I went on to, actually my first job was hilarious because I was at this, every year our course would do like awards. And being the only Indigenous person in the course, I got the Indigenous Award. They have awards for this shit now? Cool. So I was sitting beside this guy who was just nonstop talking, would not stop talking. And he asked me, do you write for TV? And I said, absolutely. I didn't write for TV. But you should say you know what you're doing and then figure it out later. That's how I got my start in my career. So I worked for him for a while. I worked my way up to hosting this show. It was called First Nations Magazine. It was on a local Winnipeg show. CHTM, I want to say it was called, but now it's called Global. And then I went on to write for small Indigenous newspapers, a Native radio station, and I was among one of the first group of journalists to work at APTN National News. What's now called APTN National News. Then it was called Envision News, because we were trying to be clever. I made a choice very early in my career, and I was talking to our knowledge keeper about this in the coffee room before they took my coffee away. right? Who's that guy? Mark. See him here? We had one cup today, you guys. Anyway, see what I'm saying? Like, I'll just wander off somewhere. I decided that I was going to not work in mainstream media because back then, this is 20 years, you have to realize, this is like 20 plus years. I've been around for a while. There was no news about us. We didn't work in the newsrooms, in the newspapers, in the radio, in the TV. There were no stories. There were no Indigenous people like me that I do now doing Indigenous stories because we were considered biased. They said we couldn't do those stories. Unless, of course, we were dying or killing somebody, then we could do those stories. I once told a news director at a television station that those are the stories that I wanted to do, stories about Indigenous people doing things, making change. You know, we're dancers, we're cooks, we're jiggers, we're beadwork makers. We do stuff besides killing and dying. And she looked at me and she said, why would you want to ghettoize yourself like that? Nobody wants to hear those stories. Certainly you can't do those stories because you're Indigenous. So I said, thank you very much for the opportunity, and off I went. Except I didn't afterwards. And then I went on to do just that, to write Indigenous stories at the newspapers, at the radio station, at APTN. When we created APTN National News, many of the mainstreamers said we couldn't do it. And they laughed at us and said, oh, that's never going to work. Then we became the first by, for, and about Indigenous newscast in the world. In the world. Never let anybody say you can't do something, because it's mostly bullshit. Page 5. So we wrote stories about poisoned water on reserves, the lack of medical care and education, the CFS system, residential school, the 60s scoop, stories about missing and murdered Indigenous women and girls. These stories that were not giving voice, these stories that were not being shared or told, not the police, not the media, not the public, nobody knew we were telling these stories. If they didn't tell these stories, then they didn't have to do anything about it. But we told them, we gave them names and faces and voices. 20 years later, we see an inquiry, a national inquiry, missing and murdered Indigenous women and girls. 1,800 of our sisters, our aunties, our mothers, our grandmothers have been taken from us. We're going to hear more about that a little later. I also started the Indigenous Writers Collective. We were just this crazy bunch of writers who didn't fit in the literary mainstream because back then we didn't write poetry, we wrote protest poetry, which means it was too angry, it was too raw, it was too much truth. So there was no space for us in the literary community. So we made our own space. Make your own spaces. If you can't find it, make it, build it. They will come, and they will bring poetry, and it will be awesome. We were not like Sweetgrass and Adam Beach and that kind of stuff. We were more like, my friend Martin Francis wrote about the inner city. My friend Doug wrote about contemporary Indigenous families and the Oka crisis. Duncan Mercury wrote about Main Street. Catherine Vermette told the story of the Métis in the North End. All these people were in our group and went on to do amazing things and write amazing work. And then, of course, this Cree girl who just wanted to tell stories. So we would go and perform our work at bars and libraries and festivals on street corners, wherever we could get in. Sometimes people applauded. Sometimes they came and watched. And it just grew to this huge, amazing community. And so this is where I lived. I lived in the margins of society. I lived in the margins of news. I lived in the margins of story. And then this crazy thing happened. The CBC came calling. Like, you can't get more mainstream than the CB freaking C, right? It's like the Canadian Broadcasting Corporation. And they called me up and they said, hey, we have this show that we're developing. It's called Unreserved. And what it is going to be a weekly magazine-style radio show for Winnipeg, just for Manitoba. And we're going to grab like interviews and stories from different radio stations across the country, and we're going to stick them all in this 1 hour, and then you'll host it. Say, and now we're going to Nova Scotia to find out why the Indians are pissed off there. And then we're going to go to BC to find out why the Indians are pissed off there. So I said, well, kind of a humble start, but okay, Skoden. You know what Skoden means, right? No? Come on. I'm going to tell you everything. Let's go then. Skoden? Yep. You didn't think you're going to learn anything today. So anyway, I said, okay, well, let's do it. That was 5 years ago. Time really flies when you're making radio magic. In that time, our tiny but mighty team turned it from a weekly magazine show for a local to a weekly national show. We went from replaying items to producing our own items, our own stories, our own interviews by and about Indigenous people. Unreserved tells stories about people doing things, change makers, culture shapers. We've had artists, writers, musicians, and politicians. We've also had mothers, fathers, activists, water walkers, and youth who kick down doorways every single day. And of course, nerds. Some of these stories are really life-changing, and they change the whole game. I'll tell you two examples. Colton Bushy. Familiar with Colton Bushy? Anyone? By hands? Who knows who Colton Bushy is? Okay. Colton Bushy was a young Cree man from Red Pheasant First Nation in Saskatchewan. One beautiful summer day, he and his friends got in a vehicle. They went to the beach, they had some drinks, and then on the way back, they got a flat tire. Rolled into this guy's farm. His name was Gerald Stanley. Gerald Stanley came upon these kids being generally rowdy and trying to start an ATV. So he went to his shed, he got a gun, he fired 2 shots in the air, the kids scattered, except Colton Bush, who was still in the vehicle. Gerald Stanley walked over to the vehicle, and he says, went to turn off the ignition, gun went off, shot Colton Bush. But here's where it gets complicated. He was charged, but he got acquitted. Even though there was many questions about his story, even though a hang fire is not likely to be 3 minutes long like it was in this case, even though you just don't shoot people for no freaking reason, he did so. He was, an all-white jury acquitted him, February 9th, 2018. Tina Fontaine. Who knows who Tina Fontaine is? Tina Fontaine was a 15-year-old girl from Saugeen First Nation. She went missing in July 2014 in Winnipeg, the streets of Winnipeg. She vanished. On August 17th, her body was pulled from the Red River. Wrapped in a duvet. I still get really emotional even talking about these kids because I have kids and I love them very much. I can't imagine losing somebody in this way. Anyway, the man charged in her death, Raymond Cormier, was acquitted of second-degree murder on February 22nd, 2018. That's just 2 weeks after Bushy's killing was set free. 2 cases, 2 different parts of the country that perfectly underscored and highlighted how Indigenous people feel. That there is no justice for just us. And that there's nothing that we can do about it. Those 2 cases came out and it was devastating for the Indigenous community. We were outraged. And I don't even think that word outraged perfectly encompasses what we were feeling. We were mourning the lives of not only just these kids and these lives that were cut short, but we were mourning the injustice and the fact that they would never see justice. And that we may never see justice for our missing, for our murdered, for our kids. And so it would have been really easy to tell that story. It would have been really easy to go on the radio and rant for an hour. It would have been easy to go and say, you are the problem. You have to fix this. This is wrong. This is wrong. We would have had lots of people come on our show and say, this is wrong. This is an injustice. But we didn't do that. Because Unreserved wanted to find the hope. We needed to find the hope. So in Colton's case, we spoke to a mother of 3 teenagers who told us how she talks to them about how to stay safe and how those conversations do not happen in non-Indigenous homes. They happen in Black homes, they happen in Indigenous homes, they happen in minority homes, LGBTQ homes, about how to stay safe, about how to talk to police officers, about how not to be killed. Those are conversations that happen in every household, but it was a necessary one. We talked to a father who teaches reconciliation. His name is Negon Sinclair, Murray Sinclair's son, actually. And he goes across Canada, he talks about reconciliation, he teaches us how we can meet on this road. But he even lost his hope. He lost his hope, he became angry, he became bitter because of Colton and because of what happened to Tina. But then, it was the young people who pulled him back and said, no, you can't lose hope. We need you. You are our uncle in the community. We need our uncles in the community. We need you. You cannot give up on us. You cannot give up on Canada. For Tina, we honored the legacy that this little girl had left for us. We talked to a group of women in Winnipeg who offer safe rides called ICWay, so they can keep other women and girls safe from the streets that she disappeared from. We talked to a graffiti artist in New Zealand who painted a giant mural for Tina in Auckland, New Zealand, Aotearoa, also known as. And we spoke to Tina's Auntie Thelma, who shared not this picture of this little girl wandering the streets, but of a happy, smiling girl who loved to cook, who loved her friends. And up until she was taken by the CFS system, was loved. There's been more truth and resilience. Jordan Tutu, the first Enoch player in the NHL, shared how the loss of his brother Terrence drove his career, but also how he struggled in his personal life with addiction and how he overcame that addiction. We talked to Buffy St. Marie, singer, activist, artist, teacher, general badass, who told us that even though she discovered she could not read music because she's dyslexic, she did not let that stop her. She just made the music that she heard anyway. And it's not just Indigenous people. Not just indigeni. And that's a word, thank you very much. It's other Canadians. There was a non-Indigenous woman who approached me in Toronto one time. And she said that she was so inspired by what she heard on our show that she wanted to give land back to Indigenous people, to a First Nation that she was neighbors with. Now, I'll be honest with you, I rolled my eyes. I was like, okay, whatever, crazy lady. But it was true. I didn't roll eyes in front of her, that'd be rude. But inside, I was rolling my eyes so hard. Because, you hear these kinds of things. Is it metaphorical? What do you mean? But she actually gave back land to a First Nation. And she inspired other people who talked around the show about it. She inspired other people to give back land. Which is all really what we want. If anybody has any land they want to give me, my needs later. And of course, it's not always so large. Some people act in small ways. They shift perspective, they listen, and they're open to learning. I met an English guy who became a powwow dance because he fell in love with an Ojibwe woman. Another guy keeps track of all the Truth and Reconciliation Commission's calls to action on Twitter and what's been acted on and what still needs to be done. They're just small things, but they make a huge difference. People doing things. Every week we get letters from listeners about how the show has affected them and how they see this place and our relationship, this place we call Canada, or Canada, the village. Unreserved is a radio space for Indigenous story. Indigenous truth, Indigenous resilience. And that people trust me with their stories every week is a responsibility and an honor that I will never waver on. Now, at the end of every show, I always say, thank you for listening to Unreserved. I'm your favorite cousin, Rosanna Deerchild. Actually, do that in studio. Now, it was just like this off-the-cuff thing that I said one time that really caught on, because I thought it was funny. I'm your favorite cousin. You know, if you were in a family, I'd be a cousin who always brings the chips. How about chips? Got any tip? But, so I said it this one time and it sort of caught on, so now I say it all the time at the end of the show. And people will ask me, what do you mean by favorite cousin? And Indig and I will tell you, because everyone is their cousin, obviously. Like if I go back home, I'm related to half the reserve, I'm not even telling. But in the greater sense, it also means all my relations, which is something that we often say, which means that we are all related. We are all connected. We are all the same family, the same community, the same country. All my relations means we are all in this together. We all have a story, and they're all stories worth telling. So tell yours. Like I said, thank you.
Okay, thank you, Rosanna. So I have time for 2 questions because we have 5 minutes left. So anybody have any questions? Show of hands.
Why didn't you tell me to shut up?
Would I be able to get in touch with you, because I'm also an Indigenous up and coming poet, and everything you just said was really inspiring.
Thank you. Sometimes I don't know if you're listening, y'all. It's like,
can I come talk to you after?
of course you can.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And for you, Sheila, give me a second.
Hello.
Hi.
My name is Ganabrown, and I'm from Saskatoon, but I've lived in Ottawa for most of my life. So I thought it was really interesting about you talking about your podcast Unreserved, because myself and a couple of students from Gloucester High School here in the city are actually starting our own podcast called Rewritten about what it means to be Indigenous living in the city in 2019. And what happens often in our discussions is that it does turn negative and it turns sad. And my question for you was, how do you manage to keep that hope intertwined with what you're saying? And how do you manage to keep leading on the way to recovery rather than just getting stuck in the sadness?
Well, fortunately, we have a lot of Indigenous people that will share that hope and will remind you of what you need to be doing. I mean, we can talk all day about the atrocities, and we probably should talk about those things, but there's always another side that you have to also shed light on, and that's the hope, and that's the change, and that's the people that are bringing that. So keeping in mind that while it's important to tell those stories, it's also important to give something to your listener. And often that's a piece of hope, often that's love, often that's sharing a beautiful story. Whatever it is, find the beauty in it. Because you have beauty in you, and so share that. That's it. This is easy.
Thank you.
Guys are easy. Is that it? Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
For a moment, it is just to announce that in order to keep our schedule tight and right, the next workshop will be a couple of minutes short, if you're going to do that. Thank you.
Okay, so quick reminder, everybody after your lunch break needs to be back by 11:50 back here in the auditorium for a performance by Twin Flames. Everybody taking a look at your workbook, checking your color, and following the sign posters over here.
Good morning and welcome. My name is Kim Bruton and I'm the literacy coach with USCGSD. It is my privilege and my pleasure to introduce to you today the speaker for the Indigenous Truths Workshop. We have Crystal Samaganus, otherwise known by her adopted name as Christine Cameron, who is featured in CBC's podcast Finding Cleo. It is a story that she's going to talk about in search of her missing sister who had been adopted out in 60 Scoop, along with 5 of their siblings. All 5 of them, total of 7 children, 6 of them were adopted out. And Crystal is here to tell her story. Thank you. These are cool. Hi, my name is Crystal. What's in a name? On my driver's license, I have the name Christine Cameron. It's not really something I identify with. My name is Crystal Samaganus, and since the podcast was released, I decided to go back to my original name, which is Crystal Samaganus. I'm from the Little Pine First Nation, which is actually right beside Red Pheasant. Colton Bush is my cousin. So when Rosanna was talking about Colton and Tina, that gave me right here, because I grew up in Saskatchewan. I know how racially divided the western provinces can be. I know what the racial atmosphere is there. Now, who has all heard podcasts? Quite a few. Okay, so for those of you who haven't listened to the podcast, I do require some background. I am a 60s scooper, and as Rosanna mentioned, 60s scoop happened actually from 1959 to 1992. There was a settlement announced in October 2017 from the Government of Canada that announced a settlement for 60 scoopers that said that the loss of our cultural identity was wrong and that we would be compensated for that. And so the 60 scoopers actually encompass probably around 250,000 Indigenous children worldwide. I'm the youngest of 7. The podcast focuses on me and my 5 brothers and sisters. There's only 4 of us left. Cleo was my oldest sister. And what happened when we were apprehended, nobody adopts 6 kids at a time. We were separated and we were sent all over the United States and Canada. 60 scoopers of, let's just take a little aside with the podcast. The podcast has had over 23 million downloads worldwide. When I did the podcast, I had no idea it would have that kind of impact, that kind of reach, that kind of engagement. It just kind of blew my mind, and it still blows my mind today. But in releasing the podcast worldwide, I heard from non-Indigenous allies all over the globe. I've heard from 60 scoopers, my cousin who's in Sweden. I've heard from people in New Zealand, Thailand, Spain, Britain, everywhere, because the 60 scoopers are sent all over the world. For myself, only myself and my 1 older brother stayed in Canada. The rest were sent to the States. And so Finding Cleo focuses on the search for my missing sister, because when I was 18, that's when I found out I was the youngest, that I had brothers and sisters, that I was Indigenous. Well, I knew I was Indigenous. I was like chocolate in a world full of vanilla. I knew, right? My mom, she's got blonde hair and blue eyes. My dad is Scottish. My adopted parents, anyway. Blue eyes. Like, I knew from a young age that I was different. And I grew up in an all-white, non-Indigenous community called Wynyard, Saskatchewan, in the heart of Saskatchewan. And if you drew a line between Yorkton, Saskatoon, and Regina, Wynyard is right in the middle. And so it was a town of 1,500, primarily Ukrainian, Icelandic folks, you know, and I was the only indigenous person there. So I spent a lot of time in isolation, spent a lot of time on my own with my art. A lot of traumatized people, they find identity in creative arts. Why? Because nobody talks to you. You know? I remember this one notable teacher in grade 3, because I spent my time getting beat up a lot. I had those Indian Affairs glasses. Like, there's a real thing, right? You know why? Because Indian Affairs only allows you so much. So you gotta get the cheapest glasses you can get. So I looked like an owl, and I had braces, and I had a perm because it was the 80s. Yeah, I grew up with a perm. I just look back at my high school and I cringe because it was, yeah.
Oh my God, you're lucky.
Yeah, it was horrible. So, back to my grade 3 teacher, Mrs. Bergfeld, I got beat up a lot because, you know, like I tried to be included with, you know, other kids and such, because everybody wants to be part of a social circle. And when you're different, that circle shrinks, right? How do you express yourself? You know, I'm still a thinking, breathing, feeling person. I still have lots of things to communicate. I still have this fire. How do I share this? And so Mrs. Bergfeld noticed that I was getting beat up a lot. So one time she was kind of snowing. She goes, "You don't have to go outside, Christine. You can come inside." And I actually need this picture of this drawn for me. Can you draw it for me? Because she saw that I was a good artist. Okay. So she started letting me stay in at recess instead of getting beat up. And I would draw these pictures for her. And she put them all around the room, which was cool. And then she entered one of those pictures in an art contest. And I won. She didn't even tell me. She says, "Here's your prize. You won the library contest." And it was a whole bunch of books. It was an art kit. So that was the start of my art. Because I'm an oil painter. And yeah, I'm an oil painter and I'm also a writer. I'm also a poet. So the creative arts are very, very important. So growing up in Saskatchewan was very isolating. I really retreated to art. I would draw on my pages, I would draw, I was just the kind of child that learned by observation. I'm not the one to write. In high school, I was an unusual student. I was a good student. I'm blessed with having some sort of semblance of intelligence. So when I was in high school, because I was socially isolated, didn't have very many friends, I would just get out of class and walk because I would get frustrated. I had anxiety. And if you listen to the podcast, you would know that there were not pleasant things that happened in my adoptive home. I was sexually abused and physically abused from a young age, probably about 6. And so that made me retreat even further. And I overcame that by my creative arts, my creative fire. It had to have an outlet. No matter what happened to me, no matter what resilience my ancestors left with me, it still lived within me. And if you listen to the podcast, the search for my sister started when I was 18, because then I realized, oh my God, I have all these siblings. I could have had backup all this years, right? That was so amazing to me, because I thought I was alone. I thought maybe this was an isolated incident for my mother to screw things up so bad that I had to be adopted by non-native people. I thought, why me? Why is this only, I thought I was the only person that this happened to, right? And then 18 years old, my mind was blown because I found out I was the youngest. I found out I had brothers and sisters. And I found out I came from somewhere. That just totally blew my mind. And also when I was 18, I met a fellow I started dating and got rid of the braces, and I started looking not too bad. So I started dating a fellow from a neighboring reserve. He was from the Gordon First Nation. and he took me to my first powwow, which was actually the Treaty 4 Indian days. It was at Fort Cacao. And it was held in conjunction with ball tournament and rodeo, and legit there were thousands of Native people there. I was just like in shock, because I had never seen so many of my people before. And he took me to my first powwow. And I had been ashamed of my people until then. And so he took me to Grand Entry. I had seen these people listening at Grand Entry would all stand and face the middle. And so we stood there. And the drum started, and of course they started moving to the beat. But they don't burst into dance until the fourth round of the song. So I was just kind of quiet. And I watched these people. And when they burst into dance, you were the most beautiful people I've ever seen. Why did you take this from me? I had never felt pride before then. Never. When you live in isolation, my favorite story growing up was the ugly duckling, because I was always told I was ugly. And I heard that word squaw too when I was younger. I heard that many times. Little Indian people throwing rocks at me, never accepted. Chocolate and vanilla, I laughed about it, but it hurt back then. And sometimes it still hurts to be different, to be isolated, to be known that you are different than. I know what that is like. So when I saw all the powwow dancers, I will never forget that. And my boyfriend Kevin, he says to me, "What's wrong?" He was just crying like a baby, right? It was like, I've never seen anything so beautiful in my life. And I haven't. Every time I go to a powwow, I relive that moment. And I'm filled with pride. And finally, these are the beautiful people I come from. This is beauty. This lived in me and it was quiet for so long. So today I am rocking black powder. This is the Cree Chief black powder. He's actually Blackfoot Cree, and he's from Alberta, and I found that I was descended from him. So a friend of mine in Toronto, his name is Jules, he's a graphic artist. He released a shirt. He said, "I gotta have this. This is fierce. This is the resilience of Indigenous people. This is the resilience of a minority. This is the resilience of traumatized people. People who might be, not recognized. People who might be invisible. People who might be forgotten. People who are mistreated. We are still fierce." And when our elders spoke about that light, that is exactly what saves us all. That was exactly what lives in us all. Light. Light is important. Light is vital. Light is there no matter how small. Every human being has a spark. That's what gives us life. Yeah, so today I'm an activist. And with the podcast, I will give you a snapshot. Because we were adopted all over the States, when I was 18, I found out I had my sisters. I found all of them except for Cleo. Cleo is my oldest sister. We had heard that she had been murdered but we didn't know where her body was. The podcast, I didn't even know what a podcast was until Connie Walker decided to listen to me. She believed me. Because over the years, my entire life, I was trying to tell the story because I had reconnected with my mother. I had reconnected with my brothers, my sisters. And we had this story of where I came from. That's important, to know where you come from, you gotta know where you're going and all this. It's important to your identity. It's integral to you as a human being to know the people that you come from, to know your legacy. Never ask a question unless you're willing to know the answer. Sometimes the answers you get are not the answers you want. Sometimes those answers are not easy Sometimes they're really hard to digest. They're really hard to listen to. But me wanting to know and seeing how beautiful everything was, yes, there was some darkness there. There was, yes, some hard truths about my family. But I needed to know. I needed to know because by the time I was 21, I had my first child. And I thought, if I don't answer these questions, I'm going to pass these unanswered questions to my children. And when you become a parent, then you realize that, oh, hey, you got your seatbelt on, where are you going, all this kind of stuff. That's all expressions of love. And then you understand that you are not alone in this universe. That your life has a purpose, that you have some continuity, that you have some inspiration, you have responsibilities as human beings. You have a sacred role. So, I took it upon me to not have any unanswered questions for my children, because I knew how much those unanswered questions resonated and ricocheted in my skull with my own experience. A couple weeks ago, I spoke at the Canadian Labour Congress. They had the first inaugural National Indigenous Lobby Day. This was awesome. This was awesome because our non-Indigenous allies came from across the country to hear me speak. And I was thinking beforehand, how do I explain intergenerational trauma? So, intergenerational trauma, for me, is like swimming across this great lake. You see the shore on the other side, you see beauty, you see trees and everything. You see a destination, a goal. However, you're swimming across this great lake. And if you think too much about what your mother went through at residential school, or you think too much about the loss or anything like that, then you can slip under the water. And it's really hard to stay afloat. That's what intergenerational trauma is for me. As an Indigenous woman, to hear about Colton Bushy and Tina Fontaine and Neil Stonechild. Neil Stonechild, you should look him up. He is the reason I left Saskatchewan. He was a good friend of mine. Does anybody know who Neil Stonechild is? Neil Stonechild. He was my crush. He was a very handsome young man. He lived on the streets of Saskatoon at the same time I did. I had reconnected with my brother Mark at this time. We lived on 26th Street in Saskatoon. And I knew all the street kids from the 20th Street from my brother, because my brother was into dealing drugs, and I wanted to reconnect with my people, so I knew all the street kids. Neil was among them. And I also knew the Saskatoon City Police. And I knew racism at that. Neil Stonechild was picked up by the Saskatoon City Police, and he was driven in the middle of winter. I think it was -20, something like that. Something crazy, something unsurvivable. He was picked up by the Saskatoon City Police, dropped off in Farmer's Field, and left there to walk back. And he froze to death up there. That's called the Starlight Tour. Now, you'll never hear about them doing that to young Native women, because they had no purpose for the Native girls. We are considered prostitutes. We are considered the low of the low. And then when that happened to Neil, I remember the Saskatoon City Police stopping me. I remember, all the attitudes of society and the justice system towards Indigenous people. And I decided, I don't want to stay here in Saskatchewan. This is dangerous. I could die. It's pretty sad when you're 18 years old and you realize that you could die for the color of your skin. So, that happened. I think one of the most life-changing events, too, one of those harshest realities that I faced was I was 18. And I was in Air Cadet at the time. I got my pilot's license. I had a lot of money because I went to work for the summer. I had over $5,000 in my bank account. going to the University of Saskatchewan, and just for the heck of it, I decided to get hair extensions because my hair was short. So I got hair extensions. They were like $500 some. It was insane, but I rocked these hair extensions because I wanted long hair, right? And I remember going to Confederation Mall, so Mall in Saskatoon, and rocking hair extensions, back, going to University of Saskatchewan, all cool. And I saw my aunt Joanne, that I'd grown up with. And I see her from a distance, and I was like, hey, and she ducked into a Kohl's bookstore. And I thought, okay, well, she was with some guy, right? And so I was like, oh, okay. And I waited for her, I made eye contact with her, and I waited, because I didn't want to interrupt her, she was getting the book, right? Anyway, when she came out, I actually walked up to her smiling, and then she gave me the dirtiest look, and she walked away. Then I realized she didn't recognize me because of my hair extensions. And I realized that how I was raised, if I knew piano lessons or if I had good grades, none of that mattered. None of that mattered if society sees only the color of your skin. And this is the reality I had to live with. To know that none of that matters now. This is society. This is a new ballgame. So I sat down in the mall on one of those benches, and I just absorbed my reality. My new reality. My parents are very well off. I had a pair of shoes for every outfit that I had that matched. My parents are millionaires. They live in a 7-bedroom house. But I have no contact with them. Because it's not money that defines us. It's not social status that defines us. It's the light inside of us. It's our ability to shine regardless of anything that happens to us. It's our ability to spread that hope and to survive anything and give hope to others. So yes, we live in a flawed society. Yes, we do. And yes, there have been really dark times as of late. We hear about New Zealand. We hear about Colton Bushy and Tina Fontaine and other atrocities that roll past us in our Facebook newsfeed, that flash across our screens. We cannot think that we are immune. We cannot think that our doing nothing is having no harm. So I'm an activist. I'm an environmental activist now. I moved to Ottawa for the sole purpose of being an activist because that odd little podcast where I chose to tell Connie Walker the depths of everything that I'd gone to in hopes of finding my sister, and they did. They did find my sister. And I went to visit her grave in New Jersey. And she took her life at the age of 13 because she thought she had no choices. And I remember, if you listen to the podcast, Connie Walker, as a storyteller, has had 23 million people basically listen to 8 hours of atrocities against Native people with residential school, missing and murdered Indigenous women, the 60s scoop, and really bad child welfare policies. She educates you. She takes you on a journey, and it's a really put together podcast. So for 8 hours, she weaves this story that teaches you, the pain that we live with every day. And I get lots of feedback on Twitter and Facebook and all these other platforms, and people say, you're inspiring me. You're saying things that I only wish that I thought but couldn't express. Thank you. And I only did it for one purpose, and that's to find my sister and fill all those little holes in my heart. So now I have those answers. I have all those answers. I have all those questions answered. And that's a good thing. So now I have a social media following, and I see Mother Earth and I see atrocities happening in humanity. I see a political view, a political scene today, 2019 Canada, that I hope I would never see. It's 2019, and I have to explain to my children what white supremacy is and why we have to discuss it here in our modern day. That blows my mind. So I came here to Ottawa for the sole purpose of being an activist, to make change, because I have the gift of talking to people so that they will listen. Because you can only talk to people from here. People only listen if you speak from here. And of course, my heart is huge, was once this huge void that might swallow a normal human being. But with the strength of my family and my sister, and the pride and love I have for my people, and all humanity, I choose to get up every day and pray instead. And get at it again, trying to make positive change. So yes, I'm an environmental activist. I was actually on Parliament Hill on February 19th. February 19th was the day that the yellow vesters came to town. And I was on Parliament Hill that day. It was not a pleasant day. But I was up there so my kids didn't have to be. I heard some horrible things. But we are resilient people, very resilient people. And the podcast resonated all over the world, and it was like #1 on iTunes here in Canada for a while, it was on #1 on iTunes in the States, and in Australia. Because what happened to Indigenous children here in the 60s too was the same as the stolen generation of Aboriginal people in Australia. So I thought that was pretty amazing. So anyway, I've rambled on long enough. If anybody has any questions about the podcast, by all means, ask them. I am an open book, and I will help you with the experience of my life and everything that I am to try to make, a positive impact on you. So Sarah was the one who did the PowerPoint, and awesome. Any questions you have relating to the issue of missing murder, Indigenous women and girls, residential schools, 60s scoop, and child welfare? I used to be a business consultant for First Nations, so yeah, I try my best to improve the lives of the Indigenous community in society. Anybody?
This isn't necessarily a podcast, but I know that you mentioned that you didn't find out you were the youngest of 6 siblings, and 7 or 6?
7. What happened was, we listened to the podcast, my mother, she was sent home from residential school at the age of 12, and she was pregnant, and she had my oldest brother, Miles. He did not survive because my mother was only 12. So he's not really included in the podcast because he died so young. So the podcast concentrates on 6 of us that were staying and my mother raised.
Yeah, but my question was, how did you find out that you were doing 6 siblings? Like, how did that happen? If you don't remember answering.
It was the weirdest thing. My adopted mother said she had this envelope, and it was, full of about 7, 8 pages. She had it folded in. She had it in a nice legal envelope. And she put it on the buffet, and she says, you're adopted, right? I said, yeah. All the information that you're going to know is in this envelope. Open it whenever you want. So I left it there for 2 weeks. Because, even though I was abused in my home, I still had love for my mother and father. And I wanted to respect the fact that they gave me whatever. They gave me all kinds of material things. Those material things aren't the thing that make a human being. While I had everything my heart desired or wanted, so I walked by it, really wanting to open it, but I left it for about 2 weeks, and then finally when nobody was home, I opened it and I read it, and I found my whole life there. But everything was blacked out because it would have child number 1 all whited out, blacked out, and I was child number 7. It had information about my aunts and my uncles, and it just basically said that my mother was not capable of taking care of me. And it had my original name, Crystal Marie Annabelle Senegas. It had, that I was born in North Halford. My whole life basically was reduced to 7 pages in this envelope that I just read over and over and over again. Is this who I am? But it was just 40 some pages. And it was mind-blowing. Because I thought, I have to find it now. Yeah, it was pretty intense, but yeah. That's how we let me know. Here's an envelope. Here's your life. Read it when you're ready. Kind of rough.
I'm sure other people have questions, so I just wanted to thank you so much for sharing your story and everything that you have. It's so personal and intimate. I don't even know the words to say thank you for sharing that with us.
There's a painting, I'm an artist. There's a painting I did, it's called Conversation with Grandmother Moon, and it's full howling, and there's some circular stuff, and then you see a galaxy in the background, it's done in blue. And when, because I had not found my sister when Connie asked me to do the podcast, it took a year to produce that podcast. A year of investigating, and interviews, and phone calls. But we had not found her yet. So when I did that painting, I thought, I called it A Conversation with Grandmother Moon. The reason I called it that because you only get out into this world, you only get back what you put out into this world. So I figured, I need to know the truth of where my sister is. I need that truth. I can only get truth back if I give it. And over the years, I had been asking for help to find Cleo. My brother and my brothers and sisters, we wrote letters, we made phone calls, the email came along, we sent email. Yeah, so we spent a long time, 45 years, looking for her. With nothing, and over those years, people did not believe our story. They thought I was making it up. I had former, spouses who said that can't possibly be true. If you listen to the podcast, a lot of it is very incredulous, very outrageous, and there's a lot of moments where that might make you want to cringe because it's a very intense podcast. And so Connie believed us that she was able to substantiate all these horrible facts. And, the circumstances around why my sister was missing. So I thought, if I speak truth, then truth will come back. So that's why the wolf is howling. And I thought, I believe that if our words resonate, if we speak our truth, then our words resonate and truth comes back to us. So that's what that painting is about. And that's why I chose to tell Connie the truth about everything to find my sister, and CBC did find my sister. And that's something I never thought would happen when I lived, and I remain grateful to CBC for finding her. It was legit a miracle.
Did you end up, how did they actually find her at the end? Because, there's probably a lot more, missing people out there that are hard to find. How did they go about doing it?
The podcast revolves around 60 spookers, because we're all 60 spookers. And the fact that the government sent out these children all over the world, and I knew the government knew where my sister was, or at least where she was adopted to. The problem was, between the United States and Canada, every time I asked Canada, then I go to the States and they would say, well, legally she originated from Canada. We have different laws down here. You're not even from this country. We can't tell you. So it just became ping pong between two countries. And the way that she was found was that we eventually found out where she was adopted to, in New Jersey. And then out of sheer determination, one of the producers for CBC, she found this website. I didn't even know this existed, but apparently there are websites out there. If you know where somebody generally is, you can look up a website that goes through every single grave. So what this producer, her name was Marnie, Luke, what she did was, she came across, in the process of investigation, she came across this website that listed and had a photograph of every single grave marker in New Jersey. And she went through thousands and thousands of them and came across one that kind of fit the general description. We didn't even know the date she died. We didn't even know her name, nothing. And she said, this might be her. This could be her. It kind of fits. And so what she did was her and Connie went down to New Jersey without telling us because she didn't want to give us, any false hope. And she was able to confirm that yes, that grave marker did belong to my sister, and that was her name. Her name was Cleo Madonia when she was adopted. So it was just out of sheer investigative journalism that she was able to be found. Because Canada didn't tell me where she was. CBC told me where she was. And yeah, she went through thousands and thousands of photographs online, one by one, looking at them. And somebody did that for us. That's pretty amazing. One thing I want to mention about the podcast is the podcast is set up in such a way chronologically that it tells a really good story. One thing I want to put in here is that I'm a very spiritual person. And all through my life, I've had spiritual experiences. Because when we were sent all over the world, the Creator sent us a little gift, and that gift was spiritual awareness. And in those times when I was maybe being bullied or when I was a kid or something like that, there was this spiritual presence with me that would tell me things, that would show me things. One of those stories was when I was about 8 or 9. I had an older brother, adopted brother, and he was 4 years older than me, and we had this nice big cabin at a place called Fishing Lake in Saskatchewan. So I always tried to be friends, but of course I didn't have any friends, and I was trying to hang out with my older brother and his friends. And they got tired of it, and Sean, your little sister, bugging us again, and started chasing me and throwing rocks at me. And in Saskatchewan, there was, at Fishing Lake, there's this little forest, teeny forest. And I knew that there was a wasp nest from, just being in the area. So I actually ran into the forest. They were still chasing me, throwing rocks at me. And I thought, you know what? I've had enough. I'm just going to go to the wasp's nest, and if they sting me to death, that's fine. So I actually ran to that wasp's nest. There was a log falling over. And I ran to the wasp's nest, and I just collapsed on that rock, and they're still throwing rocks, and I could hear them saying, shit, she went to the wasp's nest. And they started stinging them. And I was crying, and I was just traumatized, right? Because they hit me a few times with the rocks, and I figured I was going to get beat up, but the wasp saved me. And then suddenly, when I was sitting there crying on that log, I realized, wait a minute, I'm not being stung. So then I realized that, there is a spiritual presence out there, something greater than us, that protects us, that stays with us. Even though we as adopted children, we as taken and isolated children, we as traumatized people, we are never alone. There is a spiritual presence. And so I believe that Cleo speaks to me. If you listen to the podcast, you will find that evidence of the premonition that Cleo, she speaks to me, and that's throughout the podcast. There's some weird and uncanny things that happen at the podcast. You know, one of the things was her police file was supposed to be destroyed in 1983. It was still there. How did, and even the police officer was like, oh, why is it still here? And it was there in its entirety, and I have her police file. That was one miracle. Another miracle that happened was I needed my passport to go to New Jersey, and I didn't have it. So I was living in North Bay at the time, they told me, go to Toronto, we'll pay for your passport. So I went down to Toronto. I thought it was like getting a driver's license. It's not. You need a guarantor who has a passport and who's had it for 5 years and who's known you for 5 years. Toronto is a city of 1.8 million people, plus surrounding areas. So I'm sitting at Lester Pearson Airport, and then I just found out online that I need all this information. I did not have it. And they needed me to get this information today. They needed me to apply for my passport today. I'm thinking, oh shit, I screwed up. And I started messaging people on Facebook and madly, do you have a passport? In Toronto, right? I don't even live there. And what happens, I get on the U train to go to Union Station from the airport. I'm sitting there, and then I see this man, he sat down in front of me, and between the seats, he turned to the side. And I looked at him and said, oh my God, James, is that you? It was my childhood friend James from high school. I have not seen him in 30-some years. He had just come back from Australia, and he was on his route from Vancouver, Toronto, and he lived in Toronto, and he just happened to have his passport. Like, how does that happen? And he's known me for like 30-some years. James, can you come with me to the passport office? Yeah, I have the day off. I'll show you where to go. Like, how does that happen in a city of millions of people? So I thought that was pretty cool. And even on the day when the police file, because like when I got to the, I had to lie to New Jersey police. We had to do some pretty, imaginative stuff to find her. And together we all did that, right? So at New Jersey police, I kind of faked it. Because I went in there, so I'm looking for the records for Queen, I'm her sister. And you could tell by, from her photograph that it was her sister. And then, but there was a point where they said, you have to know her adoptive mother's maiden name. I'm panicking inside, right? And I said, can you help me spell that? Because I needed that information. I'm panicking inside, right? And then she looks, oh, wait a minute. Oh, wait, it's not even included in this form. I guess you don't need that. So many things happened to make sure that we found her. It was just like, if you listen to the podcast, there's so many incidents like that. So yes, there is a spiritual presence. There is a power greater than us that sustains us, that watches over us, that connects us, that provides for us. Yeah, some of us call it God. I call him my creator. I'm not a Christian, but I think that all of us as human beings have humanity, have light, have potential, have hope. And that's the thing that I concentrate on. Yeah, so the podcast is 10 episodes. Each episode ranges in length from a half hour to an hour. But it's really interesting stuff. And Connie has set it up like a story. So if you listen to it in chronological order, you will find the story unravel, this investigative, in-depth teaching thing, but it's set like a story. And it really took off with the crime genres all over the world, and those are the people that made it number one in so many different listening platforms. I just killed somebody's picture. So, yeah, it's a really awesome podcast. You can download it on iTunes, any of those podcast apps. And I learned something interesting from one of my colleagues at work. I was telling him about the podcast. He says, "Oh, you know what? I listened to a podcast and you can listen to it and fast forward." What? Apparently there are apps out there, podcast listening apps, where you can speed through a podcast. You can speed it up. Oh my God. Listen to it at normal speed. I don't want to be sounding like the chipmunks. You're not going to get it. You're not going to get the full impact of the podcast on fast forward. Please don't do that. Oh, that's funny. Technology nowadays.
So Crystal, I have one last question if you don't mind.
Sure.
What's your relationship like now with your siblings moving forward? Like since the podcast, what, if you don't mind answering, what's your relationship like?
My oldest brother, Johnny, he lives in Pennsylvania. I met him for the first time in July 2017. I only got to spend 2 days with him. We connect on Facebook. We talk every day. In fact, he sent a message today saying, "Oh, I'm so proud of my sister." But I posted, a picture from earlier. And he does a lot of, advocacy down in the States where he's from, in Lancaster, Pennsylvania. The sad thing about my brother is he lived less than 2 hours his entire life from where my sister was. And he did not even know. When he was growing up, he lived less than an hour away from where she was. So close all this time. And at one time we thought maybe we would bring her back to Saskatchewan, but then I think about the laws between the United States and Canada and all the red tape and the money that it would cost to bring my sister back to Canada. No, because my brother will not leave Lancaster, Pennsylvania, because he has a family there. He is very much loved where he is. He had a good experience. And he is close to my sister, and he will take care of her. So my brother and I were very close. I'm very happy to have him in my life. I consider him my family. And he's not far from my sister, Christina, who is actually in Vermont. Chris and her sister, Christina. Yeah. She kept her adopted name of Christina Baker. She lives in Vermont, and she lives a very quiet life with her cats, if you listen to the podcast. She's a very gentle spirit, and I talk to her quite a bit too. My older brother, Mark, intergenerational trauma, was not so gentle with him. He lives a very tumultuous life. I love him very much, but he's got his moments. And I love him. That's all I need to say about that. He's in Edmonton and was estranged from him at that moment. And I hope that one day, we can find peace with each other. But this is the reality of Indigenous community. Like sometimes the trauma is too great for some of us to bear. And I believe that's what's happened with my brother. He's estranged from all of us because of the podcast. Because he lives right in the midst of Saskatchewan and our families, our biological families that we were taken from. And some of the truths that were shared in the podcast, he has to deal with it, so he's pretty angry that we shared it. But, I think sometimes when you have truth that is your own truth to share, that another person cannot say, you should not be talking about that. That's what keeps us quiet. But in sharing with the podcast and casting that truth out into the world, it becomes less of a burden on me. There's a piece on the National and CBC, a 12-minute piece about the podcast, and in there I watched it the other day and I thought, this was before we found Cleo. I thought, I look so angry. I look so troubled. And I was, because I knew the answers were there, but we didn't find Cleo then. And I look back at myself then and I thought, But today, you see this smile because, I found my sister. I found a connection with the world. I can share the truth of what happened to us and not be ashamed. So that's awesome.
Thank you very much. If we could all show our appreciation for Crystal, for Christine, for coming in today.
are you guys doing? Good. This is a pretty awesome day to be a part of, right? Better than sitting in class all day. School is cool though, right? My name is Chelsea June. I'm Métis, I'm Algonquin Cree French Canadian, born and raised right here in Ottawa, actually. We still live in the region, although we're not here very often. We're very privileged to be able to tour internationally, also nationally. And we really appreciate days like this where we get to come in and share and meet with our youth, because you guys are our future leaders. And so you being here today with open hearts and open ears means so much. So chimiguch, which means thank you in my Algonquin language.
Hey. All right, somebody knows the drill. My name is Yayi. Yayi in my Inuktitut language means George. So if you're George, hi Yayi. I come from northern Quebec, a little place called Huaptak, on my Inuit side, but I'm also Mohawk. So I'm one of those hybrid Eskimo Hawks. Get it? Eskimo Mohawk. Anyways, yeah, it's awesome to be here. We do a lot of schools across Ottawa as well, and we love every minute of it. Like my wife said, it keeps us home as well. We just flew in from Iqaluit last night. We did a concert up there inside a curling rink. So it's nicer to be in a room like this. So we're going to talk a little bit about songs. We're going to talk about our backgrounds, what the songs mean. Obviously, some of the songs are in Inuktitut, in my mother tongue. I was privileged to be raised by my grandparents who taught me their ancestral ways, you know, and I think a lot of that pays homage to what we should be as people, as human beings, and that's the goal of it, because right now our world is suffering. Our youth are suffering because there's a lot of labels being flashed around. Well, you gotta say this, you gotta say that. It's like, it's nervous when we wake up now. You know, we look at Facebook, we look at Instagram, and everything has a hashtag. Well, you gotta do the hashtag right, even. Like, wow. We gotta slow down a bit. Because we all, yes, come in different shapes, sizes, colors, languages, religion, but we're all the same. And that's what our cultures teach. Indigenous, Inuit, we are all of the same people. The indigenous tribes of the rest of the world as well, they all teach about where we all come from and how we have to be as people, where we respect the land, where we respect the people, where we respect the animals. It all goes hand in hand. We wake up, what are we going to respect? Everything out there. Because in the end, one of these days our beautiful world is going to implode because we don't take care of it. Our song we're going to sing is a song called Bill Satautsung. It's usually our warm-up song. It's a bit on the folkier, melodic side. And it's a song about how my mom and my dad took me out on the land of all the things I just explained. So this is Bill Satautsung. Can we all say this? Bill Satautsung.
So easy.
Bill Satautsung means my upbringing.
Aulay bunga, ilisang tautsunga. Ulo me mo tigu me taha. Biro sa roti gilap takani. Aulay bunga. Anana maho kausiri lautangi Tigumyataka Ineape Bitianya pude ikayok daw gyalene ikayun yakote Aula ivunga ila sauta utsunga Ulo memo tigumya tara Atataganon makainiming Ilisa daulaw kunga Umayup yusing ini Dagode taut sunga Nanining ini Sunaw ning ini Atoner me Ang nasuni me Aulay bunga Ilasaw taut sunga Ulo memo tigumya tara
Jimmy Brooks, thank you.
I'd like more of her in my modern, please.
It's great sign language. Yeah. So, have we met any of you before? Have we been into your schools? Have you seen us at We Day in and around the city? A few? Nice. Well, it's great to re-see you, and we're also great to meet all the new faces that are here today. You know, the first summer that Yaya and I toured the Arctic, I met so many amazing people. I met so many great youth. And, you know, in talking with the youth, I realized how much of their lives mirrored mine. You know, growing up here in Ottawa, I didn't have access to my culture. And for many generations, my family was taught to hide the fact that we were Indigenous, that we were Métis. And so that was really, really difficult. You know, we always had to, you're distracting my ADD like crazy right now. Sorry, I have really bad ADD and it needs to be like quiet so I can hear my own mind. But yeah, so I grew up here in Ottawa. I didn't have access to my culture and it was really, really tough. Growing up, my mom used to always say, and we're very proud of being Indian because that was a word that was still used when I was growing up. It wasn't a bad word. And so when I got into my adult years, I really wanted to know what that meant. And I sat at the foot of many elders and I listened. I listened to the stories from all different tribes across this nation, and I picked and chose the things that resonated the most with my heart. And for the first time in my life, I felt like I was home. And so when traveling the Arctic, I realized these kids, even though they've grown up in their community, there's such a sense of loss of hope and identity and pride in who they are and where they come from. And that mirrored exactly my own experience. And so I was on an airplane. We have to fly in really sketchy, scary airplanes to get to some of the communities. Most of the communities in the Arctic are fly-in only. And so to distract myself within the vibration sounds of this airplane, I started to hear a melody. And I pulled out my cell phone and I started to sing what I was hearing. And I thought, if I could tell everybody in the world that will listen one thing that I hope that they remember throughout their lifetime, what would that be? And that's to be proud of who you are and where you come from, no matter where that is. Because we are all unique and we are all here for a reason. And you know, we might not know that reason right away, but as we progress throughout our lives, it'll be shown to us. So this is called Plain Song. Now you can start. My ADD's good. Hi, 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 hi. Hi, 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 hi. Hi, 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 hi. Hi, 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 hi.
put in our place, told we belong. Scared to speak up, scared we'd be wrong. What if in that moment we stood tall, refused to surrender, refused to fall? Hi, 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 hi. 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 Dare to reach out, don't feel alone. Stand all together and stand strong. For we can be the change we wish to see. It's all up to you, it's up to me. Stand proud and sing it. Hi, 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 hi. If you're not too shy, you can sing it. Hi, 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 hi. Hi, 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 hi. Hi, 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 hi. Dare to stand out, don't be the same. Soar like the eagle in your veins. Be proud of who you are and what remains. Look in the mirror and sing. Hi, 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 hi. You can do better than that. Come on. Hi, 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 hi. Hi, 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 hi. Hi, 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 hi. Listen to the voice that's deep inside, the one that tells you not to hide. Don't follow the path that lies ahead. Make your own road instead. Stand proud and sing it. Hi, 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 hi. 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 Sharon Grace, thank you.
Nakopmek in my language means thank you, in my dialect. So thank you. You know, for what we do, you know, we're always honored. We're always honored to have people in front of us. We're always honored that your ears are engaged and your hearts are open, because that's what it's all about. Music is that. Music is our medium. You know, from time to time we get the odd, well, who do you think you are? You know, and the fact that music is subjective, we realize that we cannot please everybody, and we never claim that we want every listener out there. But when it comes to the conversations that we talk about, you know, we talk about reconciliation, we talk about all of this stuff that's happening, you know, that is one aspect. That is only an aspect that if you take with you whatever it is that you pick up from whatever conversation you're having about human nature, the rest is all up to you. Because you're the one piloting your body through life. And it is totally, totally up to you to decide how you're gonna live it. Because I can tell you, you know, I've lived many lives. I was a cop for 12 years as well, you know, in my communities, you know, and I saw a lot of things. And to be up here, to be able to say, I survived as well, is another aspect. Because the struggles that Indigenous, Inuit, and Métis people across Turtle Island, not just Canada, you know, we live it. Other countries have the same situations, the same problems, exact mirrored. The difference is, we don't have bombs flying. We don't have all these crazy temperatures that also just wipe out the beach lines. You know, we have a great nation that needs a lot of work. It needs a lot of work to start being a little bit more transparent about a lot of the things. But like my wife said, you are the future here.
Mhm.
You know, we have to treat each other every day like we're neighbors. Need brown sugar, you go next door.
Mr. Rogers.
Yeah.
So, you know, in what we do, we always try to talk about the past, the present, and the future. Because I think in going forward in Canada, we need to look at it as a whole. We need to educate ourselves, which is why Yai and I sing and do music. We love music first and foremost, but we also love to share the stories. And so that it will gradually, hopefully, change the mind, even if it's only of just one person. So all of our songs are written for different reasons. This next song is called Broke Down Skituk, which means broke down snowmobile, broke down skidoo. You know, in the intro to this song is that in the 50s and 60s, most people don't know that the RCMP were ordered to go up north and slaughter all the sled dogs, all the huskies. And so overnight that halted the nomadic way of life for Inuit, because Inuit were nomadic and they would travel with the different seasons and where the animals were. And so when all their dogs were killed, they had no way of going out on the land. So starvation was rampant across the north, and they quickly had to adapt. Communities were set up. Inuit were no longer nomadic. And at the same time, Bombardier came out with the first ever snowmobile. Go figure. And the problem with the snowmobiles is that there were no mechanics. So people didn't know how to fix them. They would just continuously break down. And the difference between a dog and a snowmobile is if you fell through the ice, the dogs most likely would try to get the owner back out. Or in a storm, they would find their way home, whereas those skidoos didn't have GPS back in the day. And so it was a big, you know, we talk often about, you know, from igloos to internet in 50 years, and that was the reality for Inuit. It still is today, you know. And yeah, so this song is about that, you know, it's about raising awareness. It's a funny song. It's a song about how every part of the snowmobile breaks down part after part after part.
Imagine going about your day, you have it planned out. You forgot to do groceries the night before. You've got a job interview, but you also have an exam. And your car, you know, it's not running too great. So you go out thinking everything's going to go smoothly, but then your car breaks down. So it's maddening, right? That's what it is. You know, you may leave your car, slam it, kick it as if it's going to start, swear at it. You know, it's just daily life realities. But we got to laugh at it sometimes, especially after.
It broke down.
Sa
higher. Sukahaya. Sikitora, Sukahaya. Kumwa daptungi, mipim haya. Sukahaya.
Thank you. And so what Yayu was doing is a form of throat singing. Have you guys heard of Inuit throat singing before? Yes. So Inuit throat singing does belong to Inuit women. It is a culture that is very sacred. It is something that was almost taken away. It was believed to be demonic by the church back in the day. So there's been a huge reclamation of throat singing. And the way that I don't use it, the way that Yayi uses it as an Inuk man is to raise awareness across Canada of our women and to honor our women. So the noises Yayi was making, in a sense, are imitating the snowmobile breaking down. And the barking noises I was making was to imitate the dogs that were no longer there. But the great moral of the story is that Inuit sled dogs are back. There are many people that are working on the revitalization of the dog sledding competitions. And Yayi's brother is actually at the forefront of that movement and that race in the Nunavik region. Let's do it, Grace. All right. So we get to do a lot of really amazing things. We've been doing music full time for 4 years now. We've played over 800 shows. And it's been this incredible journey. We were asked to be part of a Gord Downie tribute concert last fall. And, we didn't grow up with Tragically Hip music, which is pretty tragic. Have any of you, do you guys know who the Tragically Hip is? So you're much hipper than me. And so we had to learn this song. And, when we discovered this one song, it just meant so much. And, as Indigenous Inuit Métis First Nation people, we really need allies. People that listen to our voices, listen to our stories, and truly listen, not talk for us or talk over us. And, Gord, the last years of his life were dedicated to reconciliation and to having our voices heard in a time where people didn't really want to listen, and it wasn't cool to listen. And so every time we sing this song, we thank Gord. And we ask listeners to become allies as well. Educate yourselves. Education is key to changing this country. Thank you.
He said, I'm fabulously rich. Come on, let's go. She kinda bit her lip. Geez, I don't know, but I can guarantee there'll be no knock on the door. 'Cause I'm a total pro. That's what I'm here for. I come from downtown, on and ready for you, on with will and determination, and grace to her. Grace, grace to the secret rules of engagement are hard to endorse. When the appearance of conflict meets the appearance of force, but I can guarantee there'll be no knock on the door, 'cause I'm a total pro here. That's what I'm here for. I come from downtown, on and ready for you, on with strength and its frustration, grace to grace to It's really hot up here. Holy. You know, it was minus 25 when we left Iqaluit yesterday morning. And so there was a 45-degree difference from the time we took off and landed.
By the way, we're down here, not up there.
What? Whatever, it made sense in my head. Like, not too many things. So this last song we're going to sing for you guys, thank you all so much. You can check us out, twinflamesmusic.com. We're on internet, Spotify, iTunes, all that fun stuff. We're working on our third album right now. Our last album had 21 nominations. We won 2 Canadian Folk Music Awards and 2 Native American Music Awards. And so we're super proud. Thank you so much. Thank you. We're so proud to represent our people throughout the world, you know, and to share our voices and our languages and our cultures. And, you know, so many of our people do not get to have a public voice and do not get to have their voices heard, especially our women. And so as a woman standing on stages across the world, I'm always grateful that, first of all, I'm alive and that I'm able to do this and live my dream. And so this last song we're going to sing is called Porch Light. It's dedicated to all the missing and murdered Indigenous Inuit women across the world. It's not just a Canada problem, it is also rampant in the United States. And one woman going missing is too many. And so our job as musicians is to try and help bring awareness. And, we wrote this song with no intention to ever publicly release it. It was just our way of processing all these terrible things that we were hearing, terrible stories, meeting all the family members that were directly affected. And so this is for all our women. This is called Porch Light.
I leave the porch light on just in case. Hoping that door swings and I see your face, and how naive am I?
And I keep your photograph to this day, wishing and hoping that you're okay. And I'm missing you now.
I never happy down there. Kids are hung at the down low. Soon I hung at the down corner.
Walls the same, love remains. All this hurts inside me. Call your name to this day. Wish you were home beside me.
We've left your bedroom in its place, posters and memories unerased, and how naive am I?
Standing in the doorway, I hold back my tears. Seems just like yesterday, although it's been years. And I'm missing you now.
I never happy down there. Kids are hung at the down low. Some are hung at the down corner.
Walls the same, love remains. All this hurts inside me. Call your name to this day. Wish you were home beside me.
Porch light on just in case. Hoping that door swings and I see your face, and
call your name to
I
this
will
day.
leave a
Wish you were home beside me.
I leave the porch light on just in case. Hoping that door swings and I see your face, and
I'll leave a Jimmy Bridge.
I've been around for a bit. Along the ways I've learned, with a couple of lifetimes of relationships and some children that are older than you guys. It's always something that we have to tell ourselves, that we have to make the world a better place. And it always starts with us, especially us men. We unfortunately sometimes feel like that we're on top of the world and we can take everything we want. And let us be a little more careful and treat the woman with respect, the respect that they need, because you come from a woman. You always have to remember that. You have a mother, you have a sister, and you have a grandmother. These are the things that you always have to consider when you are maybe courting or in a relationship, you know, they're not property. So that's my message to you. And thank you for listening. Thank you, Soundman, for your job, and thank you for inviting us for this event.
Yes, thank you all so much, and thank you for being allies. And we wish you all a beautiful rest of the day of learning, and hopefully you get tons out of today and make Canada a better place. Shimigwich, thank you.
Okay. Check. Hi. Okay, thank you so much to Twin Flames. You guys are amazing. You did an amazing job. Thank you for sharing for that with us. The same thing as this morning, we're going to have the colored posters for everybody. So watch out for Mo, Miranda, and Sarah holding your posters. So if I could just get the blue team to come down first.
Birch Bark Coffee, which is an incredibly innovative social justice organization and company that works very hard to improve the lives of Indigenous people in Canada. The second speaker we have is Crystal Samaganus, otherwise known as Christine Cameron, who is a writer and a poet, an artist, an environmental activist, who is here to speak her Indigenous truth and perhaps about her sister Cleo, who is featured in the podcast, the CBC's podcast, Finding Cleo. So first up, I'd like you to welcome Mark to the stage.
Which one's working? This one? Test. I'll say Ani, bonjour. It's my way of saying thank you for having me here. I've talked to somebody at the table. I always start off my conversations or my talks, because I travel across Canada, saying an acknowledgement to the families that I'm passionately working to help out, and that's within Canada, and the ones that are dealing with a lot of the water issues. Just with a raise of hands, how many of you know of some of the water issues that are happening in Canada amongst our people? Have you heard of it? Like the water mandate, or you just know there's long-term water advisories? So I'll put things into perspective. My company is only a year old, and I never really expected to gain this much movement, this much ground for what I've created. Before I share that, I'll explain to you that water is a fundamental right, and nobody, none of your families, none of your brothers and sisters, none of your aunties and uncles, friends should be going without water. It's 2019. And right now in Canada, and for some of my communities, they've been dealing with a water crisis, a national water crisis, for over 20 years. Some kids, some students, youth your age, have never, ever seen a clean glass of drinking water. They've only been brought up on plastic water bottles. It's pretty sad. 1.6 million people, Indigenous people in Canada, 600 nations in Canada, over 200 communities, nations in Ontario, over 300,000 First Nations, Inuit Métis people in Ontario. That's who I'm targeting to help. I created a coffee company that's about innovation. And I like taking apart words, and when you look at the word innovation, it's revolutionize. So I'm about to revolutionize the coffee industry. There's a lot of coffee industries out there. I'm just going to do it better. So I created a coffee. You can come and look at them after. So I created these blends that are the platform of my social enterprise. So I'm a First Nations entrepreneur. And I've created a company that's innovative, that's cause-driven, with what I call a pay-it-forward attitude. So proceeds of my coffee sales go towards, if you look up there, there's that little white purification system. So I had those custom built. So for the set proceeds of my coffee, I will go across Ontario, have been, and then across Canada, install those in every single home suffering from a water advisory for free. It's a lot of coffee to sell. And I like giving analogies of, just so you have a vision of what I'm dealing with. So on the other side of Toronto, there's Cape Croker, which I'll be going up to. There's 900 homes suffering from boiled water advisories. So to put it in perspective, that's $90,000 that I have to raise. Can anybody guess how many bags of coffee that is? Over 1 million. So I have my work cut out for me. But when I created this coffee company, I did it for many, many reasons. There's a lot of layers. And I created this, what I call, it's a bit of a tongue twister, but I called it an Indigenous inclusion continuum. So there's exclusivity as to why I did this. And the layers as to why I did this was part of sovereigntyism, self-determination, self-governance, and for me, the big one was integrity. See, a lot of our communities have been misled, mistreated. It's what I call the get in, get out. A lot of the water plants are just, they're outdated. They're not handled, and looked after properly. So integrity is big for me. So when I say I'm going to do something, I'm going to do it. So 1 year, it's a year this month. So you guys know social media. LinkedIn, how many people have heard of LinkedIn? Lots, yeah. I have over 10,000 people on LinkedIn in 1 year. My social media from Facebook and that is probably, I'm guessing 60, 70,000 people. I don't even know what my Instagram is. But what that means is I'm gaining a lot of attention internationally because of the cause-driven movement. A lot of people there's a big shift, There's a big shift in the way people think. A lot of people are pushing away from corporate. They're more looking at products that give back. And I didn't realize when I created this that this is I was right in the cusp of this movement that was happening. My coffee's in Carleton here, being sold. It's in Algonquin College. Goes on and on and on and on. Farm Boy, Whole Foods, Sobeys, you name it, all the places the vice presidents have all reached out to me, and I have made no decisions, zero. Because I'm very grassroots, I'm very humbled by this. This year is going to be a pretty big year for Birch Bark, and to see where it's going to go. But the coffee, if somebody can give me a time when I have to stop talking. The purification systems themselves are, I really tried to cover a lot of different areas for inclusivity, and one of them with the purification systems is that they're washable. The cartridges on the inside are washable and biodegradable. So consequently, I'm dealing with or challenging the government on the wastage of plastic water bottles they bring to the communities. So in one community alone, in 2 years, they wasted now this is our money, $2.14 million. That's unreal. When we could have put that into the community for a better cause. So that's where I challenged the government. I've done it publicly where I've asked them to create a water trust fund with me to be able to purchase the cartridges when they have to be renewed. Because every community is different. I'm dealing with mercury, some communities, uranium, a lot on the public system, chlorine, dealing with salt well systems off the grid. The water mandate of 2021 that the federal government announced, some of you might have read it, some of you might not have. It's pretty neat if you read it, and I've read it 100 times. I've dealt with the leading scientists, the environmentalists, the biologists from Laurentian University, from UBC, and there was a real common thread that was happening in all these conversations I was having with all these, leading people that are dealing with our water crisis. And you know what the number one, anybody guess? Some of you heard me talk at the table. Can you guess what the number one thing is that's common amongst all our water in Canada? Anybody? It has to be treated with something. Go ahead. Yeah, you're at the table. It's chlorine, chemical. All our water has to be treated with a chemical. You know, and this is factual, that if they took out the chlorine out of the water tomorrow, just making this up, Do you know that you would not be sitting here in 2 days? You'd be dead. 2 days. E. coli, one of the biggest killers in our water. So I go around and I educate people about truth and reconciliation. Reconciliation is about healing. So if I break it down in layman's terms, it's healing. But the truth is being transparent. So not only am I bringing awareness to my communities and what's going on within Canada and our third world-like conditions about our water, but I'm also bringing a transparency of what's going on with our water in Canada. Just the same as Erin Brockovich. You heard of Erin Brockovich, maybe, some of you? Yeah, in the States, she's iconic. Canada's a little bit behind the times, so I'm bringing Canada up to speed. The inclusion continuum that I created really resonates right back to, so if I go to the left side of this continuum that I created, all my coffee has to do with something with the Indigenous community. So all the producers, the sourcing of my coffee, it's not from Montreal or Toronto. It's coming from Nova Scotia, from a company called Just Us, who I work collaboratively with. They're roasters, and because I couldn't afford a roaster, so they're helping me out. The coffee is coming right from the sourcing, and some of the best coffee in the world is coming from Latin America, Guatemala, Honduras, and the ones that are producing my coffee are Indigenous, Mayan descendants. And they are going through the same stuff that our communities have gone through and continue to go through with truth and reconciliation, marginalization, displacement, water problems, death. If you know Guatemala, a researcher talked about Guatemala. It's pretty horrendous there. But one of the cool things is that with my coffee, I even stepped it up even more, where now my coffee, I'm one of only 3 coffee companies in Canada that's carrying a logo on there that says SPP. You won't see it anywhere else. There's one in Montreal, myself, in Nova Scotia. And it's, I guess if I was to condense the wording, it's farmers for farmers. It's the true organic farmers in Canada, internationally. So it's really cool. I'm very proud to carry that label. So not only am I helping them through fair trade and giving them top dollar for the coffee that they're doing for me, producing, but they're, when I go this way to the right, they're actually, by giving me this coffee, they're helping me purchase water purification systems. So those purification systems, if you bought them in the store, about $300. I get them for $97, which is pretty good. Gives me a playing field, allows me to be able to afford them. So in the retail stores, as I grow, the retail stores get it for wholesale prices, so I have to, it's 100 bags, gets 1 purification system. And then if I sell it on my e-commerce Shopify, it's 50 bags, because I can put more money into it. So that's a lot of purification systems. The other thing that I provide too is there's a company called Flower Cart in Nova Scotia. So it's people that have a hard time getting employment. They have mental health disabilities. They have mental health issues, and Flower Cart allows them an opportunity to work. So if you look at my coffee bags, thousands of coffee bags that go out, all those labels on there are put on by hand by people with mental health disabilities. So I'm just like bringing it full circle to help people out. So I create employment. We started in Golden Lake. We just started preliminary putting in the units there, but we ran into a big problem, 5 minutes, dealing with uranium. So we went back to the drawing board, and we actually had to have new cartridges built for uranium. So we're on our way up to Cape Croker, which is on the other side of Toronto. I think it's near Bruce Peninsula. I don't know the exact coordinates, but we're going to be heading up there with probably 90 units. So we raised enough money to be able to buy 90 units. So we'll be starting off with 90, putting them into 90 homes, but we still have another almost 800 to do. So how can you help out? I created a journey for people to join. I'm just the founder. I can't do it without you guys and you passing the word on. So I encourage you to check the website out, www.birchbarkcoffeecompany, and you can get more of the story online. So I thank you very much for having me. Does anybody have any questions? I know some people asked me earlier, but anybody? Don't be shy, ask anything. You're not the only one that asked. I've been asked to do a lot of venues. Next weekend I'm actually at the Perth, is it the Maple Fest? So I'm set up there. I know there's thousands of people going to that, I heard. So I'm there. There's some Blues Fest or something happening in Ottawa next weekend. No, this weekend, Sunday, I'm at one here in Ottawa. I'll post it on Facebook if you look, but no, I didn't. I just brought enough for people to look at. So sorry, but you can go online. It's pretty easy. Independent Herb and Spice has some too. Yes. Oh, thank you. Oh, yeah. So, yeah, I mean, there's so much to tell you. A lot of the school boards have reached out to me right across Ontario, London, like Roman Catholic School Board, the Ottawa School Board, all of them. And I've been doing presentations to, 500-600 students. And the cool thing about this one, you remember when I told you about Pay It Forward? All the profits for when I raise this money comes out of my profits. When I sell it, when you get it at wholesale for your class. So if you sell it at a higher price for the coffee, that money is yours. I empower you to do what you want with the money. If you want to give it back into the purifiers, you can do that. But I'll give you an example. One school had a music class that was raising for a trip. So when I explained to the students that, that extra money is yours, I'm already paying for the water purifiers out of my pocket, so you're just helping me get there. They raised $700 in a week. And they had 30 students in the class, and only 11 of them sold, and they raised $700. And that money is going towards their trip. So there's a lot of potential for fundraising. I've got all the packages if you're interested for anything. Like you can do it for your groups, whatever you have in your classes. So, any other questions? Yes? Oh, that's a good one. I'm not a retail person, but I guess I am now. There's some pretty cool things coming up. A lot of big companies have reached out to me. When I first started, okay, this is kind of funny because when I go and speak at Shopify to all the entrepreneurs or wannabe entrepreneurs, inspiring, typically you have a business plan, a pitch deck, marketing strategy. This went out of the floodgate so fast that I didn't even have a chance to build all that. It was Shopify actually through Toby Shannon, the owners. When I went on Shopify to launch this to get access to a lot of people through e-commerce, they were the ones that actually started me off. So I always thank them in every one of my talks. I meet with them quite a lot. But that's how I started. I started on e-commerce, and then from there it just I don't know, it created a movement that through social media was very powerful. Well, I don't have to tell you how powerful social media is. Very powerful. Anishinaabe Nation, I think 2 months ago, posted my site, and within less than 2 hours, the administrator wrote to me, and there was 15,000 people that hit my site in less than 2 hours. So that's how the movement happens. And when people believe in something, because I created a journey to make a difference, people just join. So I think hopefully that answers your question. Yeah. Anybody else? Oh, so it's Mark Marcellet Nawagabo. It's a bit of a tongue twister. So Birch Island, Ontario, Whitefish River, First Nations, about 7 hours from here. Thank you.
like, whatever, he's just being weird. And then he's looking at us, there's four of us, and there's two colleagues over there. And he's just like, I don't know, like, he was just yelling, like he was walking and he was yelling, and he was like, oh, y'all native. Oh, no, you're all something different. Even though we're all indigenous, clearly we all don't look alike. I don't know what he expected. And he's like, you're all indigenous? Or, no, you're all something different. Fuck off. And that's what he said to us. And I was just like, get in the car right now. Yeah.
It's funny though, because like as he was walking away, he was all like, no, I don't mean it in a bad way. And it's like, what do you mean? Like,
yeah, so these are things that, I mean, it's not the first time I've experienced weird things like that. It just hit me. Not engaging. I don't know.
and like that's the thing too. Like a lot of these things don't come from like really malicious intentions. Like I don't think so. Like there's one where it was talking about like, can you and your people forgive my people for what we did? And like when I wrote this pamphlet this past summer, this was just an example given to me by like a co-contributor. And then like months later, I was facilitating this workshop called the Liquid Exercise. And afterwards, someone said the exact same thing. And I was all like, oh my god, that's actually real? Like it just happened to me too. And it's like, yeah. But yeah, just what is the question?
That we have a contract with the government of Nunavut to help the Inuit population come to Ottawa for healthcare. So we deal with the Baffin region of Nunavut, so some communities on the Baffin region, so the people from there will come to Ottawa for their healthcare. What we do is we organize specialty clinics, so doctors from Ottawa, that will go up to those communities to see these patients and determine, do they need to come to Ottawa for healthcare or can it be taken care of in their community? The majority of the time they have to come to Ottawa. So there is a boarding home in Ottawa, Larga Baffin, that can house about 280 people. Currently they are over full. So we have about 320 people here on any given day that are here for healthcare. So when you look at the theme of today, when it comes to trust and resilience, what we are doing is we are removing these people from their communities and bringing them to Ottawa so they can get healthcare. So historically speaking, and when you look at the past traumas of the Indigenous and the Inuit people, in the 1950s when the TB boats came to those communities and removed family members that had TB, brought them to islands. A lot of these people lost family members. They don't know where their family members are buried. They left the communities, they never returned. When you look at residential schools, when you look at in the 1960s when they scooped the children and adopted them out to white people, although we are there to help, to provide them healthcare they cannot get in their home community, still a very, very scary environment for them. If they have a child that's ill, that needs to be removed from the community, they are allowed one adult to travel with that child. And when I say allowed, the government pays for their medical travel and pays for their escorts to come with the children. They have very strict rules, very stipulations on who gets an escort and who doesn't. So when you think of a child that might be in an emergent situation that's sick, they come to Ottawa for healthcare to go to CHIO with one parent or an aunt or a grandmother, because as we learned from our speaker, it's a community that raises a child, so they don't necessarily always come with their parent. What that does is it leaves behind a family, it leaves behind other children, it leaves behind other parents. It takes that parent away from a place where they need to work or make money. The things around the table are pieces of work that escorts of children or patients themselves, because we also have adult patients, bring with them to sell while they're here, so that they can make some money while they're here. So there's carvings, there's the little seal that's actual seal skin, the owl, they do the drawings, and they'll sell them. while they're here just to make some money.
Role like the one I'm in helps to bridge that gap for parents, but also for students that might not necessarily feel they can ask questions or they can advocate for themselves. So I do a lot of advocacy around students' well-being and understanding, like when we think of well-being from the teachings that I carry, it's thinking holistically. So we think about our mental well-being, our emotional, our physical, and our spiritual well-being. And sometimes those quadrants come naturally based on our life experiences, but sometimes there's those that don't. So spiritual, I think, is a good example of that, where we think of the way that as different cultures we see the world and understand the world in different ways. And our spirituality as Indigenous peoples is distinct, just like it is for many other cultures. So for a student, as an example, that might miss school because maybe somebody was passed from their family, it may take a lengthier period of time to grieve for that person or to go through different ceremonies. And so even that, like we see today in our community, helping to explain to the school that a student is going to be away for a certain period of time because of their spiritual practices is changing things in a good way. Because maybe the family doesn't feel comfortable to go into depth about what that means to them or why they're doing it, and they might think that the student's been away and they don't want to be there. And that's, clearly that wouldn't be the case in that situation. So I really see myself as a helper, although it's this long title of Indigenous Student Support and Engagement Coordinator. I think that's really just to help with the staff within the school board. But for the young people, the students and families that I work with every day, I see myself as a helper. So whatever it is that they might be seeking, I can help them with or connect them with. In the school community, in the school board, in the larger community, because we're so fortunate, I think, living here in Ottawa, that there's First Nations, Inuit, and Métis organizations that I can refer to, and I often do read on them quite often. It's for families to be aware of what those are, and if they choose, then I'll offer to connect them with or the school to make those connections. But sometimes, because families are transient, they've been moving around quite a bit, or they're new to Ottawa, they're experiencing culture shock. So, I don't know, I wish we had more time because I would have asked where you grew up. Maybe some of you, or a lot of you grew up here in Ottawa, but maybe some of you grew up somewhere very different. And for many families that I might connect with, they might be from a remote First Nation community, so a very small community. Inuit in the north, very different culture. And then others that might be moving from different urban centers. But regardless, you can experience culture shock. And I can relate to this. I grew up in Sudbury, and I worked in Toronto for 3 years. I experienced culture shock living in downtown Toronto, just because it is, it's very chaotic. So I can only imagine for a young person, a family that is used to living in a very small setting, a very quiet setting where maybe there's very few resources, if any resources, and coming to Ottawa where it's like there's so much at once, it can be overwhelming. Not knowing where do I even start? Who can I talk to? What's available to me? That's where I feel like our team is really helpful in that way. To families, but also maybe to the larger staff in the school and the school board. So there's no shortage of work. If anything, we need more people doing this work. I'm hopeful that our team will continue to grow. Where I see evidence of that happening is going to different provincial gatherings where I meet colleagues from different school boards. So if I think about the Rainbow District School Board, actually in Sudbury, where I grew up, it's been amazing to see how much that school board has grown and the resources that they now offer for Indigenous students and families. They have somebody essentially like myself in every one of their high schools, rather than having somebody kind of spread out, trying to meet the needs of so many different students. So I know that that'll continue to happen, but it's putting in a lot of time, energy, and enthusiasm into this work, knowing that the more we approach it and we build these relationships in a good way, change will continue to happen. So, yeah, that's a little bit about the work that I've been doing up until this.
Anybody from Saskatchewan before? Got one person in here. Cool, there's 2 of us, man. It's all right. And and my father is from Kingston, Jamaica. Anybody here from Jamaica? Nice, bless up. So my father's from Kingston, Jamaica. I was born and raised in Winnipeg, Manitoba. Does anybody know where Winnipeg is? Has anybody been there? Winterpeg, Manitoba. Skills are massive. They'll literally kill you. It's crazy. So I was born and raised in Winnipeg, highest Aboriginal population per capita, and I had a really good, positive upbringing. I had two parents. They both loved me. I have a sister. She's 2.5 years younger than me. I have an older brother on my father's side, so I had a positive role model when it came to males in my life. Everything was blessed. Then there was a day where my parents divorced, and I was about 15 years old. And when that happened, I got really upset because my father and my mother always taught me how important it is that family should be the core of your existence. Family is very important. And so for them to divorce, I actually got really pissed off. I felt like I was being lied to by my own parents. So I moved out at 17. How old are we in here? 17. So I was on my own at your age. I moved out, I got an apartment with a friend of mine, and I was on my own at 17 years old. As a result of that, I quickly got street involved. So I was doing things I'm not proud of, but it shaped me to be the person that I am today. Being street involved, just to give you some perspective, I lived between two hoods. There was the B-side hood, which was a native gang, and there was an African mafia gang or a black gang. I literally lived between the two hoods. There was a block difference. You can see my melanin, you can see the color of my skin. Both of these hoods had no idea which side of the game I was on. The school that I went to was a block away in the other direction. I was walking. I would walk to school. There was days where we'd be confronted by the B-side gang. I had friends stabbed right in front of me. I've had guns pulled on me at point blank. I have friends who have lost to cocaine overdoses and no longer in this world. I've experienced a lot of things when it comes to street life. This was my upbringing when I was your age. I was street involved. I was lost. I was angry. As a result, I hit my lowest point in my life. I was at my lowest point. I had a phone call from my brother. He's like, Justin, you're going to be an uncle. What? Man, I'm about to have a daughter. I just wanted to let you know. Dang. It was like a reality check. I was like, who am I for my niece to look up to? I was embarrassed. And that was the first time I actually started to self-reflect. Who am I? What kind of man are you? Who are you to be a positive influence for your niece? I had to really check myself. So then that's when things really started to change for me. I was like, wow, like, I want to do better and be better. And music was always an influence in my life. My brother was a DJ. My dad was in a band. So growing up, my brother used to like sneak me into the club underneath the DJ table illegally, and I'd be passing him the records for him to play. Does anybody still use records here? Yeah, you still got records? Nice. So music was always an influence. So I was a wannabe rapper at the time, and that's just what was cool in those days. It's still cool today. I make a living doing that today. And so music was my outlet. And so when I became an uncle, I decided that I'm gonna change my message. Instead of talking shit and saying things that have no value, I decided to share the transition of me being a better version of myself. As a result, I started getting performances, my life started to change, I started to change my circle of friends, I started to hang out with different people, and then I started getting opportunity. And the Creator gave me this opportunity to work for the Truth and Reconciliation Commission's first national event in Winnipeg. Does anybody know or heard of the Truth and Reconciliation Commission of Canada, the TRC? Some of us? So the TRC is responsible, they put on the first national event to apologize for the residential school experience. How many people here are familiar with the residential school experience? Okay. That's historical, by the way. I didn't learn about residential schools when I was your age. I was up to a whole other time. To give you some context, my mother, I'm First Nation in Ocean Man. My grandmother was a residential school survivor. I was raised that I have 3 grandmothers because they're all sisters. They all went to residential school. My uncles, my aunties on my mom's side, they all went to residential school. So that topic is personal for me. And so when I learned this part of my history, I'm like, damn, I'm at this national event and I'm a sports tent coordinator. I had to learn things about how our people were treated in residential schools. And the stories that I took away from that event shaped my life, and I'll carry that for the rest of my existence. The things that they did to our people, how we were treated in those schools, I will never forget. And I got even more upset. I got even more angry than I was. But instead of being angry and acting out and doing silly things, I actually was like, I'm so mad at the government. I'm so mad at what happened. I'm going to be the best version of myself, and I'm going to prove to them that that is not who we are. I'm going to prove to them that we are successful. I'm going to prove to them that we're resilient. I'm going to show them how beautiful our culture is, how beautiful our people are. And that's when things really started to change. I moved to Ottawa in 2010. I joined the Canadian Forces military through the Blackbird program, which is for Aboriginal recruits. Graduated top candidate. I also got the Comrade Award. Figured, okay, I'm good at this. I'll stick with it. Stayed in it for 2 more years. I did my soldier qualification course, top candidate. I did my basic military qualification land course for infantry, top candidate. And that was the experience for me that I was actually able to mentor the next generation of the Black Bear recruits. And that experience, I really felt a sense of purpose. I felt like I was making a difference, helping them get through one of the hardest courses that I've ever done in my life. And as a result, I was like, you know what? I'm going to dedicate my professional career working with young people because I feel like they're the most resilient demographic in the entire world. I believe that. We all have gone through our own trauma. We've all gone through our own lows, and we're going to get through it. It's hard, but give yourself time. We've all been there. We've all done that. And so I think it's inspiring to know how resilient our people are. And so as a result, I got a job working at Wabano. Has anybody been to Wabano before? 3, 4 of us? Cool. It's actually where I met Cody. So it's really cool to see things full circle. And working there, I worked with young people in conflict with the law. So I helped the courthouse and I helped the police develop direct protocols so that when young people who identify as Indigenous get in conflict with the law, they would be directly referred to Wabano to get the appropriate cultural support, different to the traditional justice system. And so that really started to make a positive difference in the community. And then I needed to continue to be a better version of myself. I'm passionate about entrepreneurship, I'm passionate about music. And so I got a job as a digital media director for the Innovation Center at Bayview Yards, fancy titles. And I helped the government manage a $4.6 million contract to help innovate Ottawa and this country and help support startups and other entrepreneurs. I've never graduated university. I graduated high school 2 years late. I was in my 20s when I graduated, and it's one of the most vivid memories I'll ever have. I'm actually going to share that story. So when I graduated, the normal process, you get called up. So I get called up. I'm like this, feeling good. I'm like, hell yeah. And you go down the line, and everybody shakes your hand. Instead of shaking the hand, I was like, in front of everybody, like, just hurry up. We finally get to the end. The regular process, the dean holds your diploma, and then they take your picture. For me, I went up to the dean. I'm like, yes. He's holding it. He's like, Justin, we got to take a picture. He's holding. I'm like, I know. This is mine. He's like, Justin, we got to take a picture. I'm like, then we took a photo because I deserved that. So the point that I'm making is that when you know and you work hard and you accomplish something and you know you deserve it, you can go and take that. That's yours. You deserve it. So I won't forget that experience. So I encourage all of you to graduate because I never have to do high school ever again. And that feels good.
So, first I want to say you have been incredibly patient. I think as a teacher, vice principal, we often forget as adults how difficult it is to sit and listen all day. And I want to recognize that you have been really respectful all day in the presentations I've seen. So, Kwe, Deluisi, Palaranaltal, Delewi, Oktahumgok, Halapumigba, Alnui Gadi, Wilalan, Miigwech, and thank you for being here, and thanks to your teachers for organizing the 50
Osgood Township High School as vice principal. And I was absolutely heartbroken to leave Gloucester. I really, really love that school, and I really, really love the students and staff at Gloucester. And I felt very comfortable in the cultural diversity of that school. And I'm currently at a school which is in Metcalfe, Ontario. Does anyone know where Metcalfe is?
In the country.
It is in the country. Yeah, and it's very far away from the inner city, which I was used to working. And I, at first, was a little bit distressed about the move because I felt I couldn't do the work I needed to do there. And I quickly learned I absolutely need to be there more than I need to be at Gloucester. Because due to experience and lack of diversity in rural communities in Ontario and all across Canada, there's not a lot of opportunity for people to grow from their place of ignorance. And I think that having more people with more diversity all through the city, even the outskirts where they have like rural fairs where they show cattle, which is something I had to do this year, to go watch people show cows. It's a great opportunity for everybody to build a respect and understanding in culture. I'm not going to try to touch on everything I've done in earlier parts of the day, because I really want to respect your time and I really want to get the opportunity to listen to Simon quickly. And I do want to touch on a couple things. One, I need to acknowledge my roots. I'm from Eastern Canada, from Halapu Mi'kmaq First Nation, which is the Caribou tribe. I was raised on Mi'kmaq territory, but not on reserve. Newfoundland has a very complex history with Indigenous people and how it was settled, and pre-Confederation and not being acknowledged through Confederation. Our grade 11's here. Where are you? I'd like to point this out that at your age, my parents were 5 months pregnant with my older brother, and I was born 18 months after him. And so we grew up in very difficult circumstances and did not have a lot of money, and my parents did an amazing job through a lot of difficulty, but I was luckily also supported and raised by my grandparents. And my grandfather, very traditionalist. I could talk all afternoon about what he's taught me. A few stories are very fascinating. One in which he went hunting and shot his first animal with the help of his uncle and his father with a rifle at 3 years old. And I think about the padding we put on the corners of coffee tables so kids don't bump their heads. And I think about, my grandfather, who actually had sealskin moccasins, is often what they wear. Because, as you talked about earlier, Simon, in Newfoundland, northern Labrador, Newfoundland and Labrador, is a region called Nunavut, which is actually Inuit community in that part of Canada, which a lot of people don't know about. But we were greatly influenced by my grandfather's teachings. One of the things the beautiful things he taught us about surviving in this very complex world was Tuaktumuk, which is a concept in Mi'kmaq that means two-eyed seeing. Seeing the strength and beauty in Indigenous culture from one eye, seeing the strength and beauty of other cultures, non-Indigenous cultures with the other eye, and being able to take what you can from both cultures to make your journey stronger and your life better. My grandparents and my parents believed in education. My grandmother was a teacher. My grandfather went to university. He was very, very poor. Went to university after he worked for the forces as an electrician at 42 years old. And my mother and I, despite the fact my mom had children very young, graduated from university 2 weeks apart with our undergraduates. She did business, and I graduated from arts education. And I think I should talk a little bit more about beading than I have in the past, but one thing I try to do with the work, and many of my students, I know some of you have been in my office, some for savory reasons, some for not so great reasons. What I try to instill is high expectations. And with the teachers I work with as a vice principal, and with the students I work with, I want them to be better. I want them to be better than what they think they are and to do more than what they think they're capable of doing. And sometimes it comes across as a little bit mean, because I'm that person when you're in the hallway, or you get in trouble, I'll say, why are you in the hallway? Where are you supposed to be? And one thing I want you to realize, and your parents will nag you all the time, and I use this example, you're supposed to be home for dinner. and you show up 15 minutes late. Does somebody say something to you? Yeah? What does someone say?
Why are you late?
Why are you late? Where have you been? Your curfew was, you had to be here. And one thing I want kids to know, when we give them high expectations, Indigenous students, non-Indigenous students, any kids, you don't get upset when somebody expects you to be somewhere and asks why you weren't there when you were supposed to be there. Or when you have homework due and asking you for it. You worry when nobody asks where you've been. And you worry when no one cares if you come home or not. And you worry about the teacher who walks past you in the hallway and doesn't ask you if you should be in class. Because that's how we learn our value. That's how we learn that I matter enough for people to actually expect more of me. And things aren't going to get easier for us. Things are certainly not going to get easier for you as our world gets more complicated. But one thing we need to be able to do is hold ourselves to those high expectations and be resilient, force ourselves through the break. I think this is our last session today. I've held back from cursing because, in school I say it's inappropriate. But the other speakers have used some four-letter words. And the best definition of resiliency that I've ever heard is resiliency is the ability to turn your shit into fuel. And in my life, I've had more war stories and terrible things happen than I care to talk about. And I don't like to spend a lot of time talking about them or really giving much air to them because they've taken so much from me. I'll just hand around some of the beating tools or the templates that I use to work with students. And Simon, you are up.
Good afternoon, everybody. I just heard two people. I said everybody. How come I only heard over here and I didn't see any mouths move over there? I said good afternoon, everybody. Good afternoon. There we go. So, my name is Simon Cody, and I work at the Ottawa Inuit Children's Center. Through the Bridging the Gap program, where I come into schools and I teach students from junior kindergarten all the way up to grade 12 about Inuit culture. But that's not exactly what I want to teach you guys today. I want to teach you guys a little bit about how my stories may reflect how you guys might see my resiliency being an Indigenous person through telling you my stories. Because the way that I just introduced myself, the way that I am right now, I was not like this when I first started this job 3 years ago. This is my third school year. I've been into at least 30 different schools across the Ottawa area. I've been to the Upper Canada District School Board. I'm not trying to brag, I'm just trying to get you guys to understand that I meet a lot of people. So I'm not really a people person where I'll be like, hey, what's up, dude? Like, I'm a people person, but I'm also a people person. You guys understand? So, what I'm trying to tell you guys today through my stories is I want you guys to understand. I'm so glad how smooth this one is going compared to this morning. This morning I was not this good. Anyways, what I want you guys to do after I'm done speaking is for you guys to have a little bit better understanding, not just for me, but to give you guys an insight on what other Indigenous students may be going through. So, me, I was born up north in Nunavut, so I'm Inuit, but my father was French Canadian. So, if you notice how fair my skin is, that's why I'm really Caucasian looking in my skin, but in my face I don't really look that Caucasian, in my hair as well. But I am from Iqaluit, the capital city of Nunavut. Can you guys say Iqaluit? That's not how we actually pronounce it in Inuit. In Inuit, Iqaluit is pronounced Iqaluit. Can you guys say Iqaluit? If we have any Arabic speakers or an Arabic background, I feel like it's going to come easier to you because we use similar noises in our language. So I was born up in Iqaluit, Nunavut, and Iqaluit stands for the place of many fish. And where I come from, there's lots of fish. I love going fishing. Now, I grew up back home as a young kid, and I moved here to Ottawa on Canada Day, 2007. The reason being is because the flights were a lot more cheaper that day than any other day prior to. Because if you guys have had me or any other Inuit presenter coming into your schools and teaching you about the general knowledge and history of Inuit people up north, you're going to understand that it's very expensive to live up north. Food is sometimes 3.5 to 8 times more expensive than it is here in Ottawa or other southern regions in Canada. And just to put it in perspective, for anybody in this room that is over 2 years old, which I'm guessing everybody is over 2 years old in this room, you would have to pay upwards to $2,000 to $2,500 approximately just for a return ticket just to go up north to Iqaluit. That does not include your hotel, your food, or anything along the lines of that. That's just the airfare. So if you guys ever wanted to just visit where I'm from, you know, for like a half day or whatever, it's going to cost you guys about $2,500, even upwards to $3,000. So I moved here to Ottawa on Canada Day because the flights were a lot more cheaper. It was like a $600 flight, very expensive still, but it was a lot less cheaper than what it usually would have been. So I grew up as a young boy back home, and then I grew up as a young man here in Ottawa. But when I was growing up back home, I felt like I was not Inuit enough for the rest of the Inuit students and the Inuit kids that I grew up with. And I felt like for all the white kids and the non-Indigenous kids, I felt like I was too Inuit for them, and I was too white for the Inuit kids. So I never really fit in somewhere. Growing up for me, and you'll probably notice that because of how out there I am now compared to how out there or in here I was before. That like you're gonna notice that sometimes I don't fit in, and that's fine. One thing I'm gonna teach you guys today are a bunch of quotes, annoying movie quotes that you guys are gonna take away from today, and hopefully when you guys are feeling hard and down, you're gonna remember like, oh yeah, Simon said that practice makes perfect. Practice makes perfect, and you're gonna hate hearing that whenever you're practicing something that you want to perfect. Say you wanted to become a crazy dancer, but you couldn't hit the proper move, you know? And then you were really beating yourself up about it. It's like, well, practice makes perfect. If you were really beating yourself up and you heard that, you're going to tell me to leave, you know? You've heard that 1,000 times. But it's in those moments that you guys have really got to understand that practice actually makes perfect. And you're never going to get perfect. You got to fake it till you make it. Sorry, guys, you have to fake it till you make it. Sooner or later, you're going to be like, whoa, I faked it to here. And that's what's going to be real. It's not even going to be fake anymore because you've done it so much. So when I was growing up, I never fit in. My father died when I was 7 years old, so it was very hard to be raised by a single mother who was also raising 2 older brothers and a sister who was adopted out to my grandparents. And my mom was a really, really short woman. And me and my brothers are bigger than me. So you can only imagine how hard it was for her to raise 3 boys growing up. Especially after my father passed away, I didn't have a father figure. It was very, very difficult for me to have a voice like I do now. I had to find that voice. If you guys are listening to me like, wow, Simon, he's so articulated. It's because I wasn't before. It's because I kept on practicing. I kept on doing it. I kept on making a fool of myself. It's what it felt like anyways. Never really did. It's what you feel like in the moment. The worst that's going to happen in those situations is you're going to feel weird. I feel weird right now, but I felt weirder before in these situations. You guys understand? So I want you guys to be able to take a lot away from this. Even though I might be telling you guys about my story, and it might be saddening, whatever I'm telling you guys. Do I look sadder now? No, I've healed a lot from these stories, from these situations. All because I chose to, because I communicated, I shared these stories. That was very hard for me. So growing up, whenever I moved here to Ottawa, my mom asked me, do you want to move down to Ottawa? And it was only because I came here for vacation like twice. I was like, sure. And one thing that really annoys me, because I'm a presenter in schools, when the teachers come up and they're like, do you like it here in Ottawa? Do you like moving here? It's like, I guess if I didn't like it, I wouldn't be here anymore. I don't know. I really don't know how to answer that question. So I do deal with a lot of what people like to call stupid questions or useless questions. Then I've also dealt with a lot of ignorance. I've dealt with a lot of discrimination, prejudice, racism over the past 12 years of growing up here in Ottawa, because there was not a lot of Inuit people like we do have now in Ottawa compared to whenever I moved here to Ottawa about 12, 11 years ago. I remember people would always ask me when I started growing my hair, because I used to have short hair like you right here. I mean, like you got hair under your hat, well, like hair right here. Like me? Yeah. Not that short, but like close to that, just a little bit more than that. So I used to keep my hair really short. I didn't keep it short, it's just I was just a little brat. I was always playing video games with my mom would sit me down and be like, let me give you a haircut. Like, all right, grade 7 hits, and then I was like, no. 2 weeks goes by, and I was like, no. It kept going, and then it was long. And then I got too attached to my hair. It's attached to me, but I got too attached to it. And people would always ask me, are you going to cut your hair? And then in the beginning I was like, yeah, I'm going to cut my hair. And they're like, well, why don't you put some good use to it? Why don't you like donate to the Cancer Society? And I was like, oh, that's a good idea. It got a little bit longer, and then I almost cut it, but I was too attached to it. So I've been growing my hair for the past 11 years. If you guys wanted to know, that's usually the icebreaker question that everyone likes to ask me after every presentation. I've been growing my hair for 11 years, ever since it was about Justin size. What? Throughout that time, I dealt with a lot of people asking me, so are you First Nations? And I was like, no, I'm actually Inuit from up north. And they're like, oh, so you're Native? And I was like, no, I'm Inuit. And they're like, but you're Native to where you're from. And I was like, yes, but I'm not First Nations. They're like, what's the difference? And I had to spend so much of my time, so much tedious time telling them and correcting them, no. To the point where that if you thought I was Asian, I was like, sure, I'm Chinese. Like, I know that sounds funny, and I know I'm being like very uppity right now, but it was to a point where I was so tired and drained that I was like, I didn't want to explain what we do differently as Inuit people compared to other First Nations. For example, if you guys didn't know, and this is going to really throw you guys off if you didn't know it, Inuit people, when we hunt our animals back home, we can eat the meat raw after cutting it right out of the animal. Say if I had a seal right here and I could eat it in front of you and I'd be fine. But whenever I said that to, even whenever I say it to this day in younger classes, people look at me like, that's gross, why do you guys do that? Now it's my job to correct those kids, and I get paid to do it, but when I was growing up, it was very draining in order to be able to explain everything. So I just gave up, and if you thought I was Spanish, I was Spanish. If you thought I was Native, I'm Native, man. Whatever you guys want me to be. As time progressed, a lot of discrimination, a lot of bringing down stuff went on when I was getting a little bit older. I started attending a lot of First Nations programs at Wabanel Center for Aboriginal Health, where I met Justin a long time ago. And I was participating in a lot of these programs, learning a lot about Indigenous culture. But I wasn't really learning about Inuit culture. And I wasn't complaining. I just had nothing that I could connect to myself, the way that I do it. So I learned a lot about First Nations culture. I went to Rideau High School before it became Gloucester High School. I know Gloucester High School existed before, but I'm just saying all of you guys moved from Rideau to there. So I went to Rideau High School. I ended up just growing up because my mom had a hard life. She went to residential school. She was an alcoholic. So at one point, we got kicked out of our apartment, and I thought it was fake. Like, I thought, I was like, is this really happening? I spent 2 years being homeless to the point where I even didn't tell my teachers. That's how proud I was. Not proud of being homeless, but too proud as a person to let people know what I was going through. I don't know if all Inuit people are like this, but every time I talk with other Inuit people, because we're very quiet type people, until you get us in a circle like this, but we're really quiet type people. What I always try to point out is that there's a lot going on in their life, and they don't like to show it, and that's something I didn't like to show. I didn't like asking for help. I hated asking for help. I don't know why. I don't know where it stems from. I just hated asking for help growing up. So at one point, about 2 months being homeless, cut it off. I told my teachers, I was like, you know what I'm going through? Like, I broke down, I was swearing, I was getting in their face. I was like, you know what I've been going through? I've been homeless this whole time. Like, I haven't got a bed to sleep in. I gotta ask my friends to go stay at their place. I go scrounge up all this change to go get junior chickens from McDonald's back when they only cost $1.46. Exactly. I remember that stuff. I remember what it was like to have that survival mentality. Spent life like that for about 2 years, and I was in probably the most darkest place in my life where I just was getting by. It didn't matter what happened then. Yeah, I was just getting by in the moment. I didn't care where I was tonight. As long as I was okay right now, I'm gonna get by. So I dealt with all of that. My good friend, Maingan Nikas, he told me about the Urban Aboriginal Alternative High School program held through the Odawa Native Friendship Center. Long names just to tell you that it's the only Aboriginal school program that we have here in Ottawa. He told me about it. He's like, why don't you get back into school and transition into this program? I was like, sure, why not? So I did. I did that when I was about 18, almost 18. And then it took me an extra 4 years to finish high school because I was slacking. I went from dependent on surviving to dependent on whatever I had in front of me, and I didn't really have no drive to finish high school. I hit 21. My teacher, Selena Kata Matasawagan, told me, she's like, you know what, if you're going to graduate, you're going to graduate this year, or you're going to hit up adult high school next year, and you're going to wait until June of next year to graduate. And I wasn't having that. So I didn't care about my marks at that point. Me, I was just I'm a perfectionist with whatever it is, my art, my work. I just got to do it my way, and 100%. So I was doing all of these, like getting 80s and 90s in all my courses. And then when she told me that, I was like, you know what, sir, I'm just getting 51s now. It doesn't matter, because I just got to get out of high school. The only incentive that she gave me to finish high school was, there was this summer job program where it was like, you get a form, on a piece of form, put all your information down. Where do you want to work? There's 3 places, and if you guys could tell, I like streetwear. I'm wearing Supreme shirt. Oh, cool, son, I know. I like shoes. There was other dude. Where's that? I just seen we're wearing the same shoes, bro. Yeah, there you are. You're hiding. You have the alternate version of the same exact shoes. Tinker Hatfield, the designer of those Jordans, was going to design those to be like that colorway, but they made these instead. Anyways, that's just some nerd up for me. But what I was trying to let you guys know is I was trying to get all these jobs at like Normal, Foot Locker, Champs. Like, it was like, where do you want to work, Simon? And I was like, if you could get me at like Normal, I'll graduate right now. And I was like, well, I started getting all my stuff done. She didn't tell us where we were going to work. I graduated. It was so wicked. Had a wicked graduation. I still have pictures. My mom looks like the happiest mom in the world. And I ended up leaving. We didn't start work for another week or 2. And on that piece of paper, it said, do you like working with kids? It's like, hell no. No. I do not like kids. No. I was a little brat growing up. I was the youngest brother. My brothers hated me growing up. They wanted to hit me so bad, but they always stopped themselves. Probably because I was like 9 years younger. But I had a younger brother who's 9 years older, younger than me. He's gonna get a little bit, just a little bit. From me, it's my personal thought. Anyways, I was a little brat. Selena sticks me at the Ottawa Inuit Children's Centers. And I was working for the Tukimu after-school program, working with Inuit kids from 6 to 12 years old. I didn't want anything to do with that. Why? Because they were little brats. And I was like, no, don't ask me questions. Why am I your role model? You know? Now I'm their role model. And it happened like over the past 3 years where I was like, I'd make a few mistakes. And then my boss would come and be like, you know these kids look up to you? And in the beginning, I was just like, yeah, right, what? Not what do they have to look up to, but for real, they're really looking up to me. 3 years passed. Now I feel like I'm their uncle. I feel like I'm their older brother. It's wicked. I walk into a school that I've been to before where I present to the whole school. I don't recognize everybody in the school. I can't. I physically can't, or else something's going to go off in my brain. But whenever I walk into a school I've been to before, it's wicked. I won't even look at nobody. I'll just, Simon? What? Hey, Simon's here. It's crazy. So what I'm trying to tell you guys is you don't know what's going to happen after high school. I didn't want to work with kids, and now here I'm working with kids. Here I'm working with all you little brats. And you guys are getting something to understand of. And that's something that I really like. That's what I really enjoy. That's where I get passionate at. Whenever you see me in schools, if you get me in your classroom, don't be afraid to ask me any questions. I deal with all the racist questions, the discriminatory questions, prejudice, everything, so on and so forth. The way that I teach everyone is there's no such thing as a stupid question. There's only the 2 differences between what an offensive question actually is. You're either asking an offensive question or you're asking a question that sounds offensive. Do you guys understand the difference? You got to be able to know where you're coming from with the question in order to ask it properly. Because sometimes, like I'll tell kids in younger classes, it's like when I first moved here, it was a big culture shock. I didn't know there was all these different types of Asian people and black people and so on and so forth. I thought there was only a few types. I didn't know that there was so many First Nations people. I didn't even know there was other Inuits around the Arctic that speak the same language, but it's different at the same time. It's crazy, guys. So I hope you guys learned a lot today, took a lot away from me. I talk lots. I talked a lot more quicker than most.
So at this point in time, your day here is complete. I'm going to ask that you check in with your teachers to find out what they want you to be doing in terms of where you're gathering and meeting your rides home.